dive right in, and we should cover something really important. John, how do you like your new Switch 2?
Oh, it's nice.
That's all you have to say for it is it's nice?
Interestingly, I had a little bit of excitement on the delivery that I was supposed to, I think I was supposed to get a day of, but I didn't because Target is bad, and they felt bad about it and then refunded all of my shipping, so that was nice.
Oh, that's good.
Anyway, yeah. I mean, the only thing I've done with it is fiddled around in the updated versions of the Zelda games, and then, of course, played Mario Kart World. And I don't know, jury's still out of Mario Kart World. I'm not sure about the new jumping on stuff and grinding mechanics, but maybe just because I'm bad at it so far. But
yeah, I had the exact same reaction on both counts. Like, I don't know about this, but I bet it's because I suck at it, and that's the real issue.
Yeah, like that. I'm very much used to the much more traditional, like Mario Kart 8 courses that are much more like the earlier 3D Mario courses, whereas it's not the fact that it's open world. I just feel like the courses are designed a little bit differently. Like, there shouldn't be water on Rainbow Road. I'm going to go out and say that. No water on Rainbow Road.
Why? Why?
Because Rainbow Road is supposed to be a rainbow road, and it's like, okay, but in Mario Kart World, every track has a water section. I'm like, no, Rainbow Road should not have a water section.
Okay, why?
I saw
I don't know.
Tradition.
Somebody had noted that it's not Rainbow Road anymore or something like that.
Yeah,
I haven't seen this myself. Is this a political kowtowing? Because if so, I'm not here for it.
No, like, I just think they said like everything different in this one or whatever. Anyway, I mostly like it, but yeah, the hardware is nice. I actually have we'll talk about Switch 2 at some point in a future show, because I have a lot of things to say about the hardware and setup experience, and I'm sure you do too, but we don't have time for that today.
Yeah, that's fine. I will say, so we got ours on launch day, and the Switch 2 entered the house, and then it was Declan basically said, well, this is mine now, and ran away.
Did you expect otherwise?
No, I didn't. And I'm exaggerating. He didn't actually say that, but that was kind of the net effect of what happened. And I can tell you, when I was 10 years old and I saw a new Nintendo enter the house, I did the exact same thing, to Marco's point. But anyways, I've only had maybe half an hour of playtime with it. I love the hardware. I feel like it fixed pretty much any wrong with our original Switch. We had never upgraded past the original 2017 Switch. So I never had an OLED Switch or anything like that. We never had any of the ones that doesn't mount in the dock. What is that, a Switch Lite or something like that? So this is quite an upgrade. I feel like the graphics fidelity, again, as someone who only has a Switch in the house, is great. I'm really digging that. Everything looks awesome on Mario Kart World, and that's basically the only thing I've played. And then this is the first time that anyone in the house, including me, has done gameplay with online and live chat. And so the Switch 2 has game chat where you can connect with a friend and play with a friend and so on and so forth. And I've been listening to Declan doing Mario Kart World with a friend of his who's also a rising fifth grader, and hearing, if nothing else, this Switch was worth the cost to hear the ridiculous vocabulary that he uses. And I don't mean like colorful expletives or anything like that, and I can't even think of a specific example, but I've never heard Declan say the word bro more times than when he's playing Mario Kart.
Welcome to that era.
Right? And so it is hilarious witnessing this happen. But no, so far, so very, very good. I am really, really impressed with it. Really, really dig it. And I am excited that we should talk about it more another time. So then we start with the cheesy Apple video that leads us into WWDC. So I was setting myself up. I was bracing myself for this. I thought it was going to be an utter disaster. And oftentimes they're cutesy and silly, and they win me over just barely. The parachuting out of the plane example, which I believe was last year, that won me over more than just barely, but not by a lot. This one starts with Air Force One, Craig Federighi driving an F1 car around the top of Apple Park, and I was sold from frame 3. I was all in. I was loving every second of it, which really pains me to admit, because I know I should be all, man, that's thing, but I loved it. And when he took off the helmet at the end, and his ridiculous hair, well, his hair isn't normally ridiculous, but in this context, his hair was like 1.5 feet tall, and it was so stupid, and I loved every second of it. I thought it was hilarious. I'm guessing, though, that I am the only one that felt that way.
Well, I mean, I think it was... So, okay, going into this, I did feel a little, a little conflicted, because like part of me going into this is all of my angst about Apple's relationship with developers right now. Part of it was, my kind of disappointment as an Apple commentator in the state of Apple intelligence leading into this. But also, I am a developer, and WWDC is exciting, and because there's always stuff that allows me to make my app better or makes my life as a developer easier, or opens up new markets or whatever. So it's always exciting. And by the end of this, I was very excited. But at the beginning, I still was kind of like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go today.
No, I'm sorry. At the beginning of the whole event, or at the beginning of the video?
The beginning of the whole event.
Okay.
When this video played.
Just making sure.
And so it was. I feel like they had to set the tone. And one thing we said last week is, we did not expect them to set the tone with anything but projecting 100% confidence. So they were not going to set the tone by addressing court cases or the developer relationship or Apple Intelligence being delayed from last year. Like they were not going to set the tone from any of that. They were going to set the tone the way they always do, and that's what this video did. They set the tone with a cheesy, like ridiculously over the top, insanely overproduced, and probably very expensive video showing off Craig and Tim doing something kind of dumb and kind of funny. And that's what they always do. They succeeded. I liked it as much as I always like it, which is like, I guess that was, a good opportunity to like set up my notes window and resize windows on my desktop, before I actually had to start paying attention more closely. But they had fun with it. It's almost like, oh, how cute. Good for you. You guys had fun.
Yeah, it was well executed, but I feel like I was kind of in the same place. Not that I was expecting anything, conciliatory or any recognition whatsoever that there's any problem with the relationship between Apple and developers. But they could have gone in another direction to at least do something developer focused. And I think the thing that bothered me the most about this, it certainly isn't the execution, which was really good. It was clever and it was well done. And I liked how they integrated their products with like the loud noise and stuff. It was the fact that it was essentially a side door ad for their new movie.
Yeah.
And there's so much Apple TV media promotion in WWDC already. For the opening video to be like advertising their F1 movie, that has nothing to do with I give it to you. Can put it in the keynote. You can put it in the keynote in the Apple TV section. But the intro movie, it basically, if there was no F1 movie, I think I wouldn't have had this complaint, because it would have been like, oh, a fun thing where imagine driving a car on top of Apple Park. Isn't that funny? But it's a movie tie-in. So anyway, I wasn't too grumpy about it. But that's the one thing that bothered me about it, surprisingly, is that it was an ad for a movie.
And we'll see more ads later, but that's all right. So we start with Apple Intelligence, where they say we are looking forward to sharing more about high-quality Siri. That's not how they said it, but whatever they meant. The new Siri in the coming year. And they quickly announced they're opening up access for any app to tap directly into the on-device LLM that's core to Apple Intelligence.
Before we move on from that first part, this is the one thing that I did have time to grab down. This is as close as they got to acknowledging that a lot of the stuff they announced at last year's WWDC, they did not ship. A fact that we all know. So it's not like, they need to say, we all know, they know, and we know, they like, whatever, right? But this is as close as they got to acknowledging that. And this is direct quote from, I believe it was Federighi saying this. He said, and as we've shared, there's that as we've shared part to say, we've already told you this, so you already know this. So this is not new information, but we are actually going to remind you, which I think this is the one concession to reality, that Apple is going to remind you of a thing you already know, just because not to say anything out of it would be weird. So anyway, and as we've shared, we're continuing our work to deliver the features that make Siri even more personal. This work needed more time to reach our high-quality bar, and we look forward to sharing more about it in the coming year. That's it. That's as close as you're going to get this whole presentation to acknowledging the fact that last year's the Apple Intelligence announcement on those features, in particular the ones that everybody wanted, like making Siri better, did not ship. That's as close as you get in the whole presentation. Even later, when they start talking about Swift Assist and everything, I don't think you get any closer than that to saying, yeah, isn't it a shame that we talked about this last year and just couldn't ship it? Well, anyway, here we are again. So for the rest of the presentation, the reality that they didn't ship all that stuff is no longer acknowledged or relevant. But I do give them props for, putting Apple Intelligence at the front, kind of getting it over with their enhancements that we're going to talk about in a second, and adding 2 sentences of reality recognition to say, we both know that we screwed up, but we also know that we're not going to say that to you. So anyway, let's go.
All right, so then we quickly launch into design, and they had a brief cover flow.
Oh, wait, that's it for Apple Intelligence? You're not going to talk about the things
We're going to get there.
I'm trying to go chronologically. Have you ever been on the show before?
No, but that was the Apple Intelligence part.
Okay, so obviously, like John mentioned earlier, like there was a lot more elaboration in State of the Union about what the Foundation Models API is, but it is, first of all, it is exactly what was rumored, and it was exactly what we expected. However, that is not a bad thing, and that is not an underwhelming thing, because what was rumored and what we expected was also what me and many other developers were also hoping for. Mm. It looks really good. So what they have announced is direct access to the Foundation model on the device, the Foundation LLM or multiple models for all sorts of different tasks, text manipulation, things like summarization, recommendations. There's also what I was hoping for, which was the speech transcription model. That also appears. I haven't had time to play with it yet to really confirm its abilities, but that also appears to be very promising. They basically opened up all of their local AI processing to developers to use locally for free. There is not seemingly a way to use private cloud compute, although it's too early to know a lot of the details yet because this literally just was announced and we haven't had time to build stuff and dive too much into the examples and code yet. But and then also most of the sessions hadn't happened yet, so we will probably have a bunch of follow up, maybe correcting some of these things. But basically, it looks very much like an awesome opening up of the Foundation models that are on the device for developers to use for free. That is incredible. We focus a lot on the flashier features here and there, but what will actually make a day-to-day difference in a lot of apps is underlying tech getting better. And this piece is incredibly powerful because this is what the story of Apple and being a developer platform. If you ignore or set aside all of the financial BS that they pull, if you just look at the story of being an Apple developer, the reason we're all here, there's two. Number one, we use Apple devices ourselves, and developers tend to want to develop software for the devices they use themselves. Also, though, Apple gives really good APIs to do really complex things easily in your apps. They've done this for the entire history. This is what good developer platforms do. They aren't the only people in the universe to do this, but I think Apple tends to be pretty class leading in a lot of the APIs they offer in terms of the capabilities and how good they are and how well they perform, versus how little effort it takes to use a lot of them. And so what they've done here is, it sounds fast in a keynote. Now you can access our models locally. That sounds like a single sentence thing. That's a very big thing because so many apps will now be able to do basic AI type stuff in what seems like a fairly unrestricted local fashion to just make the apps a little bit nicer or a little bit more capable or maybe a lot more capable depending on what they are. For instance, various things I could do with this in my app. If the speech transcription API is as good as I hope it is, and I don't know yet, but it looks promising, I can offer transcriptions for podcasts. Now, there's a lot of hoops to jump through to do that. For instance, every podcast copy that is downloaded can be different because of dynamic ad insertion. So there's a bunch of hoops to jump through, or technical realities to overcome. But I can have transcriptions if I use that transcription API. Obviously, again, asterisk, complications, but that could be the thing. If I'm given a transcription, I can maybe offer summaries, or I can maybe try to detect where do topics change in the podcast and maybe insert automatic chapter marks. There's all sorts of things that you can do once you have access locally to cool AI features like this, because then you don't need to worry about your costs or network connectivity or network speed or running your own servers because it's happening locally on the device. The same way I don't pay to access AirPlay because it's just something that the devices do. I can just offer AirPlay and it's free to me to offer that. For AI features to be built in and local and free, unlocks a lot of potential. As I mentioned last episode, like any app that offers a list of things that you drill into, which is, I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of apps, maybe they can offer text summaries of the things in that list. I don't know how fast the API is yet, but maybe they can certain things they can do offline or they can do in advance, or whatever. So like maybe they can offer text summaries of things you drill into in a list. Basic usability improvement there. Yeah, they're not always perfect. We see it like in Mail. It's not always perfect, but it's pretty useful a lot of the time. And in a lot of contexts, that will provide value. So I think we are not fully appreciating yet what a difference this is going to make to have access to local AI for free. I think in retrospect, a year or two from now, we're going to look back on this as a very, very big deal.
And we'll talk about the technology behind it probably next week's episode when we talk about State of the Union, because it actually is interesting the way they're exposing this, not just the individual APIs, but just in general how you can talk to models and get results back from them with a little Apple-flavored, Swift-flavored twist to it.
Yeah. And also, looking at some of the stuff in State of the Union about the way the APIs are, it's not just a very, very simple, you provide text and it gives you back an answer. It's way more powerful than that. There's all these structured data responses. You can hook in intermediate steps that it can ask your app for more information in certain ways or to provide certain data sources. There's a lot in this API that looks incredibly promising.
With guardrail features to try to make it not be awful. You can add your own guardrails because they know theirs won't be enough. Yeah, we'll dive into more detail next week probably.
Yeah, but the foundation models thing, that alone, if there was no redesign, if there was nothing else, no fancy iPad app, windowing, if there was none of the other stuff we saw today, that alone is such a big deal that could keep a lot of developers busy for the whole year. We are sponsored this episode by Clic for Sonos, the fastest native Sonos client for iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, and Apple Vision Pro. There's even a new Apple TV app. Now, Clic is specialized on speed. Instant control with Clic. There's no lag, just seamless Sonos playback. And Clic really is a part of the Apple ecosystem with deep Apple API integration. So it offers widgets, live activities, shortcuts, a menu bar app for your Mac, even control center support. And it's super easy to set up. It ensures smooth control with your device and speakers as long as you're on the same network. And they have all sorts of features with Clic. You can do things like tailored scenes. You can personalize volume settings and speaker groups with ease. They have a quick shortcuts feature. You can instantly access your preferred settings for a seamless audio experience. And of course, all of the audio file formats are supported. You have lossless support, Dolby Atmos support for your Sonos system. So, and of course, it's still a Sonos system, so you have multi-room, awesome features to effortlessly group and control speakers. And Clic is ongoing maintained. So no matter, a lot of times, these company apps, they're not, super good at that. But Clic, this is an actively developed app, again, super specialized for the Apple ecosystem. So there's continuous improvements to enhance your experience with Clic. Check it out at Clic, that's CLIC.dance, clic.dance/ATP. And we have a deal for our listeners. You get 1 year for just $9.99. That's 30% off. Or a lifetime for $30. That's 50% off the regular price. So once again, go to Clic, CLIC, clic.dance/ATP to check out Clic for Sonos today. Clic. No lag, no hassle, just click. Thanks for sponsoring our show.
So we moved on to the design, and we start with a cover flow rendition of the processors, I think A6 or A18 or thereabouts. And they seem to be hinting that they used their own office for a lot of the inspiration for this.
Like Apple Park itself.
Yeah, that was the theme of, look at all this glass in Apple Park. You think we could be inspired by all this glass?
Yeah, that's a choice, but here we are. Then they brought out Marco's best friend forever, Alan Dye.
Is this his first appearance?
No.
When has he been in stuff before?
Third or fourth.
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4, something like that.
Maybe it's just the new glasses are throwing me. But anyway, there he is.
So anyway, so he says there's going to be a more harmonious experience. And
yeah, they use that word a lot.
Right? And inspired by the physicality and richness of visionOS. And I don't know what to make of this, because on the one side, if those are the words that make the most sense, then use the words that make the most sense. But I don't know. They have this air of hoity-toityness and They just seem
Apple design.
I know, right?
What a surprise!
I mean, I think them trying to explain their inspiration makes sense. Like the most interesting thing to me in all these videos that they've done a couple times now is he's standing. Someone told me he's standing in like a cafeteria or something. He's not standing in a design studio. But anyway, they have some tables set up, and on the tables it's so hard to tell. Are these objects that the design team created when exploring the sort of idea space, as they would say, to think of the next design? Or are these sort of after the fact objects that they created after they had decided on the design to try, let's make physical objects to convey to the public, this is the feeling that we want the design to give you. And the objects are various rectangular solids of colored glass, and also a bunch of clear glass or clear plastic things that have semicircular rounded edges on them. So you've got kind of hockey puck discs with rounded edges and lozenges with rounded edges. And those things are sitting on top of flat things that have pictures on them or whatever. So if you watch the video, they show them a couple times. My guess is that these are sort of finished products to say, these convey the spirit of the interface that we made. Maybe they made objects like that when they were exploring it, but they look so finished. And I think this is like a sensible way for designers to try to tell people the thing you say on your screen should evoke the same feelings as this stuff. And also they go through later trying to explain how like these things are supposed to be like on top of your UI. So here is a thing on a table where there's like a placemat that is like your content. And then there are these clear plastic things that is our UI we're putting on top of it. That's what we're trying to make. I like that. I like the idea of physical objects to introduce what is a non-physical interface, because it's pixels on a screen. But now we get into, okay, so is that a good inspiration? Is that a good goal? Should an interface be inspired by those things that are on the table? And I think that is maybe up in the air.
Yeah, I think I'm guessing this was all just created for the video,
and like after the fact, like not while they were developing it.
Yes, this is design marketing, not design.
Not design, yeah.
And I'm guessing there's no way those are all glass. I'm guessing that's acrylic, because glass would like chip and be heavy. And
well, you never know with Apple. You're right. It should absolutely be like Lexan or acrylic. Acrylic is actually hard to make without bubbles in it and everything. I honestly don't even know. Maybe those are all made of diamond. Knowing Apple, it's just a gigantic man-made flawless diamond the size of a sub sandwich. Yeah. So the video, the idea that they're showing. And you just have to watch the video to see this, but like think about if you had like a hockey puck with semicircular rounded edges made entirely of clear glass, and you put that hockey puck on top. I'm so old. On top of a newspaper. What's a newspaper? Anyway, put it on top of a piece of paper with text. You've probably done this. Have you ever had like a big chunky like Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass when you were a kid, right? Like the big one with the handle. It's just a big sort of lens of glass. And if you lay that on the table on top of a piece of print, and then you move that magnifying glass around or move that clear hockey puck around, what you see is the thing that's right underneath it being magnified, racing by the lens and sort of distorting around the edges. That is their inspiration for a lot of the UI. Oh, a clear thing. And when it moves on top of a surface or the thing that's underneath it moves underneath the thing, you see the details of the thing that is whirring by underneath, distorted and warped and rapidly moving, somewhat magnified through the clear thing, which is a cool, interesting effect for like an art gallery. But in terms of user interface, the most interesting thing to me, and I think the thing I didn't expect from the rumors, and the thing I think everyone who was doing mock-ups, including like Sebastian DeWitts that we talked about last time, didn't think about, was that Apple has spent years and years making translucent things, like, just look at your dock right now if you're not on Tahoe, or like any other sort of clear thing on your iPhone or whatever, making things that that convey what is behind them, without causing the details of that thing behind them to impair legibility. I don't just mean legibility in terms of text, but legibility in terms of like, can I see the shape of the button or the icon or whatever? So you want the thing behind to quote unquote show through or influence it, but it should look really smeared and frosted. And even Sebastian's things last week with the physicality thing, very frosted over, very smoothed out. because that's what Apple has always done, and that is a sensible choice when you need to be able to see the stuff that is in that clear thing. And Apple was like, actually, we really want a lot more of the contrasty details of the things below to show through, including the motion. So if you scroll something behind like a current generation frosted glass thing, yeah, the frosted glass will change based on the average brightness and color space of the thing that's behind it. But if you scroll something behind one of these clear lozenges, either the physical things on the table or the interface elements, boy, it's like moving that Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass over a magazine page. You see lots of stuff flying by, lots of contrasty edges, lots of details, lots of motion back there. A lot shows through a lot more, and with a lot more, I'm not going to say animation, but with a lot more of the motion visible. It's like that, shower glass. Okay, so if you have a shower, there have been over my lifetime at least many different generations of fads for how do we make shower glass that is somewhat privacy preserving. When I was a kid in the 70s, you probably remember this, the kind with like scalloped things that have like these little scalloped things. It was like it would make everything wavy and distorted. So it's like, well, light goes through it, but you can't really see anything because it just becomes like an impressionist painting. There's also frosted glass that's flat. There's just the trend of like 100% clear glass where you can see everything and there is no privacy except for the soap scum that you're supposed to scrape off each time, but nobody ever does. Apple has gone through a bunch of those in its UI. And in this generation, they're saying, we mostly want to see the person in the shower. Like we want to see a lot more of the person in the shower than we have in the past. So their shower door is not leaving as much to the imagination as their past ones.
It's worth, if you are able to, it's worth installing this on a test device to actually see how it works in practice.
Can I interrupt you right there, please? Don't put this on your carry phone. For the love of everything that is good and holy, do not put this on your carry phone.
Or your main Mac, please.
Main Mac. An iPad or something expendable, whatever, that's different. And I actually have put it on my iPad because I don't need my iPad to get work done. But in order to survive, I need a functional phone and a functional Mac. And anything that you think you need to survive, don't even start sniffing around at betas until, at the very least, the public betas. And even then, I wouldn't do it. We have to go through this every year. It's probably too late for all of you, but I'm telling you, do not put the beta on any device that you consider important. Don't do it. Learn from Marco and Mai's mistake from iOS 5. Learn from probably both of our mistakes in iOS 7, especially when it comes to a redesign, because everything tends to look a little wonky. Don't do it. Don't do it. Sorry, Marco, please continue.
That being said, I did it. It's really rough, by the way.
Right?
It's really, there are a lot of little UI glitches throughout the system apps, and it's rough. I will say, though, if you are a developer, you might want to do it. Don't do it, but you might want to do it because it is, so using this UI on the phone is, first of all, very informative. When you compare to the videos and everything we saw, the videos, everything is like zoomed way in and it shows everything in slow motion and look at how amazing this is. And it's all about content, which, oh my God, I have so much to say about that. But your content, we're getting out of the way for your content. You need to see more of your content. It's like, what if the app's functionality is the app's content? Okay, anyway, so a lot of zooming in and looking at the things. You really should see it on the way it works on a real phone, and you should actually use it to get a sense of what this design is like, what things look and feel correct, what things look and feel, wrong or old. My entire app with a 1-year-old design looks ancient in this system.
Just wait till you see what they did on macOS, because I made an app last year too that requires the current version of macOS. Literally requires the very latest version of macOS, and the buttons don't even look right. The buttons.
We have a lot of work to do, but so a couple of things. So first of all, John was right about the glass and everything, and the way it kind of warps things around it, and I think some of that hopefully will be tuned down a little bit throughout the summer as they get feedback. The same way like iOS 7 Beta 1, the fonts were way thinner than what ended up shipping, which was still thin, but it was less crazy thin. because like the very first beta, which was the design department's baby, it just like it was so illegible in so many ways because the fonts were so thin everywhere that they before it shipped they kind of increased the Helvetica weight there a little bit.
Although on that topic, which has come up a few times in the past, we've gotten questions about it. The idea that they come up with a new design and they go too far, and then they scale it back, which is what happened with iOS 7, and it's happened with a couple other things they've done as well. Sometimes it's frustrating and some listeners have expressed this to say, well, why do they have to overshoot and fix it? Why don't they overshoot and fix it themselves before they show it to us, right? And sometimes I think of that as well. It's like, don't ship something that you obviously know has problems, just hoping you can like get away with it or something because you think it's cool, and then scale it back. Why not do that yourself before you show it to us? But there is actually one reason to. One reason to actually try to overshoot by a tiny bit. You shouldn't try to overshoot by a lot, and I think in a lot of the cases they have overshot by a lot, and they shouldn't have done that. But the reason you want to overshoot by a little bit is because if you don't go far enough, if you're not as daring as you thought, you will end up. It's pretty easy to do that. Let's ship something that doesn't go so far. All right, is there any place where we're hurting legibility? Is there any place where we think someone might find this objectionable? Let's turn it down, turn it down, turn it down, turn it down. What you end up shipping is something that doesn't actually look that different than what you had before because you're afraid to be too different because the current thing that's out there is the status quo, and anytime you deviate from that, you're afraid people won't like it. So if you overshoot by just a tiny bit and then turn it back, you can sort of dial it in. But if you undershoot, you have no idea how much to turn it up. And so and it's very difficult to turn it up and say like, well, let's make it more extreme and more extreme. And then you're like waiting for people to yell about it. And by the time you get close to it, maybe it's the last beta. And then people start yelling. So do you back it off a notch from there? Or are you just hearing residual yelling? So like that, I have some sympathy for the idea that it's easier to overshoot slightly and dial it back than it is to undershoot, because you could undershoot by a huge amount and then not know how much to turn up, and it will basically make you timid. You'll end up coming out with something that's like, this looks exactly the same as the current thing because you already had translucency that showed through the background that was very frosted over, and you've continued to do that. That said, I think if you ship something that you know makes legible text in a bunch of places in your UI and you're like, oh, don't worry, we'll turn it down before you ship it. Like stuff like that where it's like, this is obviously illegible. We cannot ship this. I don't need to see that. You don't need to put that out and say, oh, we're just going to back it off a little bit now. Back that off internally, because illegible text or too low contrast and stuff are things that you should be able to detect behind the scenes. And I think a lot of this redesign suffers from that. I would argue that maybe even the thin text is like, well, maybe this will be okay because it's not as obvious as some of the worst appearances in this. If I was still doing macOS 10 reviews, and we haven't gotten to macOS yet, but if I was doing macOS 10 reviews or whatever the hell it's called these days, macOS reviews, for this OS, I would just be lining up screenshot after screenshot of areas where this design falls on its face where the old design did not. And those are easy to find everywhere. Obviously, in the first beta, it's going to be easy to find, but I think they've got a lot of work to do to shape this up.
Yeah, I think in particular, like some of the super clear glass, like so there are actually multiple like glass translucency effects in play here, which is similar, by the way. Like the last few OS releases have had kind of like translucent material APIs that you could use that did a similar thing of like the way like stuff could scroll under navigation bars and toolbars, and you get like those kind of blurred colors. They do that now. They have multiple materials in the new design. And some of them appear to be basically, the maybe slightly evolved version of that. And it looks kind of like, thin frosted glass. And when stuff goes under it, it gets a little bit blurred and a little bit, smeary, but not, it doesn't like jump out at you, and it maintains pretty low contrast under it. So the text on top of the surface doesn't need super bold contrast to be legible. Then they have what looks like, the clear gumdrop of acrylic moving over something where it warps like crazy on the edges of it with whatever's behind it. What goes behind it gets so bright with like vibrancy, what they call the effect. Like the vibrancy is cranked way up. So as you scroll something colorful behind one of these, it almost looks like there's an LED behind it, lighting it up into the blob of material. Like those look kind of nuts. And that where this shows up the most in the UI so far is tab controllers, previously known as tab bars. They look like unhinged. Like when you move around a tab, like you pick a tab and like it like moves it over like the blob of liquid, and it's like
it wiggles. The whole thing wiggles and shakes and scales. Like it's like you thought that the dynamic island was goopy. Now just picking a different item on a bottom bar. Forget about like even just like the clear piece of water that you're moving from the left to the right. That's there, and that's ridiculous, and it warps everything. But then after you pick the new thing, the whole thing goes wonga wonga wonga.
Yeah, it's nuts. Or like in the mail app, for instance, you open up a message, so you have a navigation stack. It pushes something in from the right. You go back to the root to the list, and the list bounces a little bit.
Yeah, they did this with messages. Like in the current version of Messages does that. Have you noticed when you scroll in Messages, all the little bubbles shake around like they're loosely attached to the background?
That was added since iOS 7, I think, because that was part of the springs kind of gravity.
Yeah, maybe I'm just noticing more because it's on macOS now, and it really bothers me when things shake around like that. But it's just, yeah, they love for things to look like they're loosely attached to whatever they're attached to, and I'm not sure that's the look they want to go for because it reminds me of shoddy workmanship.
There are places where that's a good thing. Like it can be used well.
Like the dynamic island.
Yeah, and I think, or things like scroll bouncing, which is great.
But with scroll bouncing, though, the virtual paper scroll that you are scrolling, that springs. What doesn't happen and what shouldn't happen is, all the text on the page also slides within the container of the page to go back and forth to get like closer and farther from the edge of the paper. So the paper, the thing you're scrolling feels solid. It just shakes as if it's on a spring, but the stuff inside it is firmly attached to the background. And that is that adds an air of solidity to like pull and refresh and spring scrolling. That is not the case when you have things like your interface elements shaking around on their background, like the tab bar or the bubbles and messages.
Yeah, like the tab bar here is so over the top. And it's annoying because the animation it also just takes a while. Like you have to wait for it to stop jiggling. Why? Like and I mean, yeah, maybe I'm sure you can keep using the app, but I'm sure it'll register your touches and respond before it's done animating that. But like, why is animation so long for something that is literally like switching tabs in an app? It's such a common thing. So it just, the tab controller, it looks totally ridiculous. It's also completely illegible. Like when you have anything behind it that uses the super clear glass effect, it is comically illegible. So this is exactly the kind of thing they are likely to dial back a little bit over the summer. We'll see if they do. I hope they do, because if this design ships the way it is in 1.0, like in this, we're going to have a lot of people using whatever the accessibility settings are to like reduce motion, reduce transparency. And I feel like if many people use those settings just because the new design dropped legibility so much that they have to, that is a design failure. Like people who use the accessibility tweaks to the design should do so for accessibility reasons, not because the new design goes so far that way more people all of a sudden need those accommodations. And so I was hoping this design, I was hoping they would take the opportunity here with this new design to make a design that works better for more people without using special flags to turn stuff off. And they definitely did not do that. In fact, they've gone the opposite direction. I think more people will have to use the flags to turn stuff off with this new design. And that just, I mean, this design is not about legibility at all. And maybe it doesn't matter, but certainly legibility is not what they were going for, or unless they really don't know how to do it. But I think they just don't care. Like, I think what we've seen Alan Dye's style over time. His style is all about minimizing and hiding controls as much as possible to make room for content to bleed through behind stuff. I don't think that's super effective, but it does look nice in certain marketing shots. That's obviously what he knows how to design for. That's obviously what he cares about the most. Way more above actual usability. And there's nothing inherently wrong with trying to make stuff that looks really cool. I just think it is, of course, a balance. And there are parts of this that do look really cool and parts of it that are perfectly usable. And there's also a lot of parts that really sacrificed legibility and usability for looks. That is Alan Dye's style. So congratulations, he succeeded. But and to be clear, I am excited to get into this design and to start wrapping my app around it, basically. But it is, it's certainly very opinionated. And I also wonder, like, the outgoing design of iOS 7 through 18 is largely defined by its lack of personality. Like, it had all the personality stripped out of it. And what that created was basically a blank slate for all the app developers and big companies and everything out there to define their own styles in apps pretty effectively. And so you go to different apps now, on the outgoing era, or the outgoing design, you go through different apps and you can figure out how to use them just fine, but they do have their own styles, and companies have their own like visual language and branding, and it mostly works and it's mostly fine because the system does not impose a strong opinion. Now, with this new design, the system is suddenly imposing a very strong opinion. So in this environment, though, again, this is not iOS 6 anymore. Like, this is not, 2007 or whatever anymore. Like, this is now an environment where we have this entire ecosystem built up from a decade of the system being fairly neutral and bland, which let the apps develop their own visual vocabularies. Now, the new system UI design is going to much more significantly clash with everyone else's visual vocabularies they've built up. And so what you're going to see, I think, is a pretty big, maybe a bifurcation of, like, you're going to have a lot of, like, indie developers like us who try to use the new design, but then you're going to have all the big company apps that just totally snub it and basically disable all of it or fight against it or re-implement stuff from scratch, which is terrible for lots of reasons, including accessibility. So I think there's... what Apple did here was they took a really big, bold stance to kind of grab back design authority from their ecosystem, but I don't know if the ecosystem's going to follow suit, and I don't know if they have the position to do that from. Additionally, the super roughness of Beta 1 has me a little bit concerned, like, about Apple's own UI quality here. Like, are they going to be able to polish this up and ship it to a finished, relatively bug-free state in their own apps in their own system by September? Like, maybe, but it's a tall order. It's a very aggressive move.
So we've kind of shaded into the iOS section of this. When you're talking about this design, you're mostly talking about it in the context of iOS, and we'll get to that in a second. But two things. First, on the accessibility front, which you just mentioned again, I saw, again, there's some people debating this as the keynote was going by, and they're like, oh, how is this accessible? You can't read any of the text, blah, blah. It's terrible accessibility. And people are like, oh, actually, Apple's really good with accessibility. Look at all the options they have to reduce transparency, increase contrast, reduced animations. They have like tons and tons of accessibility options and all their OSs in there. They're one of the best companies in the world about accessibility. But Marco, you made the point that, like, well, if everybody needs to enable certain accessibility options for it to be legible, or almost everybody, maybe you're like, who's using your default design? And the way I like to think about it is coming from the other angle. If you turn on a bunch of the accessibility options, which I've experimented with turning on, for example, on macOS, I think it makes everything uglier. And why should the accessibility if you have you need accessibility options, why should you sacrifice beauty? Why should beauty only be for young people with perfect eyes who can tolerate low contrast and can pick out text? Like, why do you have to give that up? I think that a good design would be both accessible and beautiful. Why do you not get to have that if you need literally any accessibility options? Because, the accessibility options, if you enable them, do the things they say. They do reduce transparency. They do reduce motion. They do increase contrast, but they do so in an extremely strong way. Some of them have adjustability, but not all of them have adjustability. And it's so clear that the designers design it the way they want it to work and then design accessibility options to, like, look okay. No one is sitting there saying, let's sweat over the 75 possible combinations of these accessibility settings, making sure every combination of these settings, you need A and C but not B, you need B and C, you need B and D, whichever combination of accessibility settings you like or need, no one is sitting there saying, well, we need every combination of these accessibility settings also look beautiful. They do not look beautiful. Turning on even one of these usually makes everything uglier, and you get the feeling that nobody cares what it looks like when any of those accessibility options are turned on, other than measuring, is the contrast better now? Okay, good job done, right? Is the transparency reduced? Okay, job done. But no one cares what it looks like. Why should I have to give up beauty for accessibility? I feel like maybe I've picked up like this animosity towards Alan Dye from Marco over the years, but like I look at him in this thing, I'm like, can't you make an OS that is beautiful and accessible and as accessible as possible out of the box? Obviously, you're still going to need to have options. Like you're not going to make it so it's perfect for everyone, but like that's the lesson of like OXO Good Grips, that if you design something for accessibility, if you do a really good job, you don't have to change anything about it to sell it to people who don't need any accessibility options. They're like, oh, this is just a better peeler. Like, they don't know it was designed for people with arthritis. They're just like, this is just the best peeler that I've ever used. That's success. Success is not, I've made this peeler that young people with perfect skin and amazing dexterity can use, but anyone else, you need to buy the accessibility handle and stick it on. And by the way, the accessibility handle is big and ugly and loose and doesn't come in the color you want and doesn't match your kitchen and doesn't fit in your drawers. That's kind of how I feel about the accessibility options in this thing. I think they are too far away from legibility, accessibility, readability. Like their default is not good enough. And the accessibility options that you turn on make everything just look so much worse. And that's a shame. And then the second thing is, we're shading into iOS stuff. You mentioned the floating toolbars at the bottom. I don't know if I need to draw diagrams about this for future shows or something. I've complained about it before, but it's hard to explain visually. But one of the things that they're doing across all of their OSs, but including on iOS, and they showed it in the keynote, a thing that used to be just the bottom centimeter of the screen with a bunch of options on it, like the tab bar or whatever, that thing will now be a floating lozenge that floats over your content. That's the whole thing on the tables. You got like a clear plastic, acrylic, or plastic. It floats over your stuff. But what that means, and they talk about in the keynote, is now you can see your content behind and around that. It doesn't go edge to edge, but it's like, oh, our devices have curved edges now. So now this lozenge correctly matches the curved edge. So this floating lozenge is floating. It's not touching the bottom of your screen. It's like, a few millimeters up from the bottom of your screen. It's a few millimeters from the left of your screen. It's a few millimeters from the right of your screen. It is floating with margins around it. That, like, I don't know why they're so in love with that. Because like now you can see more of your content. Well, first of all, no, I can't. If I have a web page and there's a footer with links in it, now that footer with links is behind the toolbar. And yes, there is a Safari option that they added back when they tried to redesign the Safari in this way a few OSs ago. That's like, oh, your web page can sense how much of the bottom of it we're covering up, and you could essentially set safe area insets for your web page, so you draw your footer above that bar. Well, if I'm drawing my footer above the bar, what the hell good is the rest of the quote-unquote content down there? Because I can't put anything there. I can't put anything for people to read because the bar is covering it. Can I put something in the 2 millimeter sliver at the bottom? Maybe. Can I put something in the 2 millimeter sliver on the right and the left? Maybe, but probably not. Like, that space is not mine. My content cannot go there, even if I'm displaying a photo. Even if I'm displaying a photo, what if this photo has some text at the bottom, or I want to see what's at the bottom of the picture? I have to like yank the picture up so it springs like I gotta pull it up. Can I get the photo entirely out from behind that thing, or will the thing shrink out of the way and get a little bit smaller? That's not my content area. You're putting your floating glass thing over it, and I know you love it when like my content shows through your floating glass thing and makes it look cool or whatever. But what if I want to see what's there? What if I want to draw on what's there? Do I have to move your little thing out of the way so I can draw on that section in my drawing app? That is not my content area. It is much better when it's just a bar, because then your content begins at the top of that bar. So not only does my content actually begin at the top of that bar because that area is useless to me, but it doesn't really begin there because it's going to display it there by default. And if I try to yank my content up so I can see the actual bottom of my content obscured, then what goes behind your floating toolbar? What gets put there? This interface I find maddening because I can't think of a single situation in which it benefits me as the user in any way. There are only situations where I'm lucky enough that I don't care what's in that bottom centimeter, and so I can sacrifice all of that content, and I don't have to try to stretch it up so I can see it. I'm very angry about this because they tried this with Safari and backed off, and now they're like, nope, we decided we're just going to force it on everybody. And I mean, I haven't seen the WWDC sessions yet, but I don't think there's a solution to this. All of these sort of safe area ins, that's another crap that you can do, is just ways for you to try to work around this. But as soon as you work around it, you're left with two problems. One, what the hell do you put behind that clear bar? And two, how is this any better than what came before, which is when you had a clean separation between content and bar? Rant over, but like this is my least favorite feature of this entire redesign. It's not the glassy stuff, it's this floating bar concept, because I think it is just like bankrupt from a user interface perspective.
Yeah, because like what happens is, you're right, like what are you gaining? Like they talk all about, they kept saying over and over again in this design. By the way, this design doesn't seem to have a name. It's referred to in a lot of different ways with generic terms like Apple's new universal design language.
Like liquid glass.
No, it's liquid glass.
Liquid glass is the material. The actual design does not have a name.
But I think people will just call it liquid glass, because what else are you going to call it?
Right, but everything, so they constantly talk about freeing up space for your content, even more focus on your content. And these are terms that have been around since Johnny Ive was there. Like, this is not, a new design vocabulary. It's all about like, get out of the way for your content. But the problem is, how much of your content are you actually gaining by this? And again, John's right. Like, you look at the new tab bar area or bottom bar area for most apps, and what you're getting, first of all, you're not getting usable content. You're getting a blurred background version of the content. You can't. It's actually blurred with the way most of these toolbars are designed. So, like, you go to something like Mail.
It's blurred and distorted. It's not just blurred. It's like warped.
Yes, it's blurred and warped. Yeah, but it's mostly just blurred. So, like, you're not actually able to use that space. It's just a visual design. But the problem is, and this is one thing I think we're going to see, iOS 7 and the resulting iterations of that design language were fairly easy to design for. Translucency is very difficult to design for, because it's easy to come up with, again, marketing shots. It's easy to come up with like ideal, hand selected example content or example designs that show up nicely, and you can scroll them to the right position. You can have like all these like big, beautiful, full bleed images as your quote content that,
images where you don't care what is being obscured because you are obscuring the bottom of it.
Right. Yeah. Images where you've shot them way wider than you actually needed them.
Yeah. There's nothing down there but grass. Don't worry about it. I will never show you a picture where someone has a t-shirt on that you want to read that's under there.
Right. Exactly. But like, so when these designs hit the real world, though, it's very, very hard to design using translucency. This is what, Windows Vista tried this 1,000 years ago. Like, this is why the computer industry is obsessed with designing with translucency, because it looks really cool in demos and marketing. But then you actually get to trying to use it in a software design, and it's very difficult, and it's not very versatile. It does not adapt itself well to a lot of different circumstances.
And by the way, I will add to this that even if these floating bars were 100% opaque, you'd still have the content problem of like, you're forcing my content to go behind a thing that obscures it. So even if it was 100% opaque, and what you're getting to is they're not. So on top of it not being 100% opaque, now there's this problem of the translucency destroying the legibility of the actual controls that are floating. But the content itself, the root problem is that you are forcing my content to go to the bottom of the phone screen, and then you're laying those acrylic things or whatever they are. You're laying them on top of my content that I can no longer see. The bottom of my content is the bottom of the phone, but you just lay your crap on top of it. And I can't, if there's no more place for me to scroll, I can't ever see that part unless I stretch it up.
So what ends up happening in the designs when you design the stuff, like, first of all, it's so hard to design legible text areas this way. And so you end up, basically having two different worlds of design on the phone. You have like the idealized version of the design, which seems to be only designed to look good with scrolling lists of large full bleed photos, which admittedly, that is a lot of apps people use. That is a lot of Apple's apps, but that's not all apps. And when you define a new systems design language, you have to accommodate all apps. So again, there's a question of like, how does this work with maybe more boring apps? So again, you look at something like Mail. I always love looking at Mail because Mail is like the average app. It is a list. It's a table view or a list of text entries, and you tap them and you go in and like, what is the content in Mail? It's text. It's lists of text. So it's like it's kind of like marketing proof in a way. Like you can see how a design works and doesn't work by opening up Mail. And you can see like, okay, here's like how this hits the real world. The apps that many of us have to use on a regular basis or design on a regular basis, like how does Mail work? And Safari is also a great example because in Safari, you have to accommodate for not having any control over the content that's being displayed. Because if you're going to say, we're going to make room for all your content, has Spotlight your content. Okay, what content? Example content designed by Apple's designers, or real world content for that's actually out there and uncontrolled and uncontrollable? And Mail and Safari are these perfect examples of like they're stress tests for designs. Because in Safari, you have like, again, when John was saying like, when they tried years ago that weird floating bar, well, guess what? The new bar is way worse. Also, closing a tab is now an extra tap. Hope you enjoy that.
The Safari thing, by the way, their solution back then was, we'll just add some new properties that, new WebKit Safari on iOS specific properties. And just the whole world will just update their web pages. It's like, no, they won't.
They won't.
You just won't be able to see the links that are at the bottom of a page. So many pages, when you scroll them, the links are close enough to the bottom of the web page that they will be obscured by the bar. And what are people supposed to do? They might not even know they're there. Maybe with a translucent thing, they'll see some blurry thing behind there, but they'll be saying, how do I tap on that? It's being blocked. Do I stretch it up with one finger and then tap on it? What if you can only like pull the page up so far before it like stops moving? It's just a bad idea. That's why they didn't do it. And here we are. We're back here again.
We really should move on from the design. And I know we're not going to be successful in it, but I'm going to try to make us move on. And I'm going to offer my 2 cents, which is, and I need you to hear me out. I hate it right now, but I genuinely think I'm going to love it by the time they get themselves under control. And I know we just talked about this, so I'm not going to belabor it, but I really think they way overkicked, indulged themselves. But I really do think that a lot of this, in principle, does work. I don't particularly disagree with anything that you two said, to be honest with you, but that being said, I think that there's a lot of potential here. And I feel like this is, when it presents well, which admittedly is on Apple slides and Apple demos and not as much anywhere else, or at least not today anyway. When it presents well, it presents really well. And I really, really dig the direction they're going. I think the magnitude is way too much right now, and I think they need to dial it back. But I'm enthusiastic about it in principle. I think it's going to be really great. I ran Call Sheet against iOS 26 and immediately wondered if I'm going to be able to get anything done this summer because, oh man, there's a lot to do. But
yes,
that being said, I think modernizing the OSs is good. I think bringing them together tastefully in principle is good. I think we could definitely go on a 3-hour rant between the three of us as to where they went too far, where they didn't go far enough, mostly where they went too far. But in general, I like the direction where all this is going. I think I'm probably most enthusiastic about the three of us, and that's fine. And I'm really excited to see how this turns out. And I hope by the end of the summer, I will be standing on top of your two carcasses laughing, saying, haha, I was right, even though I'm not so confident that's what's going to happen. But I'm hopeful that I will be the one that is right, with you two slain beneath me as you thought that this was going to be a wreck and they would never fix it. And it turns out they did. So we'll see what happens.
We are sponsored for this episode by DeleteMe. DeleteMe makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online from hundreds of data broker websites at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. Now, there's this whole creepy industry out there of data brokers. Here's how this works. You've probably seen this. If you ever search a search engine on the web for your name or the name of somebody you know, you see all these different websites that advertise, look up their addresses and their address history and their phone numbers and their family members and all this stuff. These are all data brokers. What they do is they get as much information as possible from as many people as possible out there. They buy it, they sell it, they trade it, and they will sell your information to anybody who wants it for, a nominal cost. So it ends up being kind of creepily easy to look up people's info online and to get all the details, addresses, family members' names, kids' names even. It's really messed up. So this is a gross industry. DeleteMe will go and opt you out of hundreds of data brokers. They know how to file the takedowns and the opt-out requests and everything. So you sign up with DeleteMe, you provide them the information you want deleted from these sites, and they will go file these hundreds of takedowns for you. They will send you regular personalized reports showing you what information they were able to find and get rid of. And this is an ongoing service. It's always working for you, constantly monitoring for your information to pop up on new places and removing the personal information you don't want out there. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for DeleteMe, now at a special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your DeleteMe plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/ATP and use promo code ATP at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/ATP and enter code ATP at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/ATP, code ATP. Thank you so much to DeleteMe for sponsoring our show.
Let's carry on with the keynote. iOS 26.
Actually, yeah, well, on the topic of on iOS 26 and actually touching on design, we were all scared they were going to make the icon circles. They didn't. Yay!
Yeah, that is very good,
Right?
actually.
So let's thumbs up for that. We were all scared they were going to change the Squircle. I don't think they did. Casey, can you confirm the Squircle is the same?
I think it's the same, but I don't have a discerning enough eye to be able to tell you with certainty, but I believe you're correct.
Well, it doesn't matter. We all have to make new icons anyway.
You're right. And so, but the thing they did do, and it was they have an app for making icons, which is nice. It's part of Xcode now, Icon Composer. And their idea for icons, which I think they've done with all of their icons, but it's not mandatory, but it seems like the direction they want to go, is conceptual, again, with their little physical toys, conceptualize the icon as a layer of frosted glass pieces, each of which is essentially a solid filled vector image. And then it's just like Photoshop layers. You take three vector images, or like, I think the one they showed was like for the weather app, blue background, white cloud, yellow sun. And you just have dials. How frosted do you want them to be? How translucent do you want them to be? They put on little edges and glows, all the things that you would do in Photoshop layers. But your icon is essentially three vector template images that you combine, or 4 or 5 or 6, however many layers you want to put. And Icon Composer will turn them into a frosted glass looking icon. Apple's on it with a bunch of their icons. And I think those icons look pretty cool. They look like little pieces of frosted glass. To Marco's point earlier, it's a very opinionated style. They say, this is what we think icons should look like. It's like, well, all right, if you decided your icon should look like a bunch of stacked pieces of frosted glass, that's cool. There is a functional component to it because iOS and all the other OSs essentially let you say, oh, but now that your icons are essentially a stack of template images that we're applying effects to, we can really easily make you a dark mode version, and we can make you a clear version for our 20th anniversary phone that's going to be a clear sheet of glass. Like, because there's nothing inherent, like it's just data. It's like vector shape, color component, and for the clear one, we just desaturate all the color component and make them very transparent. Like it's a flexible way to make variants of your icon because they are structured icons. It's not just a grid of pixels that you upload at various sizes. That is clever. It's interesting. It does give you the ability to do a lot of new things with your icons. And also every single icon that exists that is not Apple's icons is not one of those icons right now. So how many apps are there in the App Store? How many icons, quote unquote, need to be converted to this? Or what, because we saw before, we have tinted icons today. We have dark mode, light mode icons. Not everybody did it. And not everyone's going to do this. And I feel like what they're doing is producing this sort of sedimentary layers of icon design eras as they keep introducing new and different ways to make icons. I'm glad they didn't change the shape. I'm glad they're still squircles. I think this style is actually cool and interesting, but now it's going to be like, oh, I can see that as an icon from this era in history. It's like a Taylor Swift era store, but it's the iOS icon era store. It's just like all these different icons made over the years with different styles, and only the very newest ones will be made of a bunch of layers of stuff. Like, Casey, your thing is the clapper board for call sheet.
Yeah.
You could make that out of a bunch of pieces of translucent things, but like, how many layers is it? Is the clapperboard just one layer? Do you make a bunch of the little stripes individual pieces? Or do you deconstruct and then reconstruct your icon for frosted glass? Or you just say, screw it, I'm keeping my icon the way it is, it's fine?
Yeah, I don't know. And that's the thing, is that there's how many apps, and then in any app that's worth its salt, weight in gold, I don't know what euphemism I'm looking for. Any app that's any good is going to have a bunch of alternative icons. And so, yeah, this is a lot of work for icon designers.
Yeah. And again, like a lot of big companies are just not, they're like I'd say most big companies are just not going to do this. The thing is, like, iOS app development for most companies is not like the main thing they do. They have, a whole, if they're a big company, they have a mobile team, and like the specific, like making a perfect icon that fits into iOS is low on their priority list because they want the same icon to be used everywhere across all of their properties and all of their apps and all of their platforms and everything else. And then for small companies, usually they can't afford full-time iOS developers. They might contract out the building of an app, and then it's like, well, we had this app made for us 3 years ago. We have to call them back in now and spend even more money to now remake this app for the new theme and the new icon. So a bunch of them will never update or will take years to do it because they can't afford to. And so then it's like, I think what we're going to have is a very split look. We had the same thing with iOS 7, the exact same problem with iOS 7.
Or dark mode icons, or, because that's like the current version of iOS. It'll tint your icons. You have no choice. Like whatever your icon is, they're going to try to tint it. And they'll do something. And if you don't like how your icon looks, then change it. Tough luck. Dark mode icons that are custom, you'll do if you care about it. And now it's like one more thing. It's like, oh, well, if you really care, you'd make these layered frosted glass template icons that will look good in clear, in tinted, in light mode, and in dark mode.
All right, so speaking of, they also are offering all clear app icons. I'm trying to be positive on this episode, so I'm not going to talk about those anymore.
They're going to go great with the 20th anniversary complete sheet of glass phone.
I guess so. The camera app did get simplified as we expected. I like this in principle. I don't love that in order to get to, say, Pano or anything like that, you just need to know where to swipe, which is not great, but I mean, I don't really know what the alternative is.
Again, this is Alan Dye design. Like the previous camera app was a huge amount of complexity, much of which was buried behind gestures. The new camera app is a huge amount of complexity, much of which is buried behind gestures. It didn't really get easier, it just got different.
It got glassier.
Yeah. Okay, fine, but that's... again, he is the junk drawer theory of design. Just sweep all the complexity into the junk drawer, and it's easy. It's well designed now. It's like, well, no. Good design can adapt to and reduce complexity, not just hide it under the rug. But this is hiding under the rug. So, okay, I mean, it looks nice.
I think they added some hierarchy. It seems like they're surfacing more controls that used to be more buried based on usage. So I give a thumbs up to that.
Either way, I'm really mixed about this because I think the good news is unsophisticated users are going to have a better time with it until they want to do anything but the norm. If they want to do anything but a photo or a video, then they're going to be very confused very quickly. But
that's actually one of the things that argues for hiding everything in junk drawers in the camera app, because so many people use it, and them accidentally tapping something and not realizing it is probably half the problems that they get.
Yeah. We talked about, photos, where they said many of you missed using tabs in the Photos app, which...
Unfortunately, we've totally ruined tabs from this point on, so sorry about that.
Oh, calm down. We already covered it. So that's the thing. That looked good to me. Safari is the tab bar thing we already discussed. The FaceTime, they talked about FaceTime a bit, and then they talked about CarPlay, and I got to tell you, I'm real excited about the look of new CarPlay, and perhaps the best couple of features. Number one, tapbacks in CarPlay. I don't know what the UI affordances is for that. They showed it for a flash, so I don't know how I could do a tapback in CarPlay.
Hey, Dingus, give that a thumbs up.
Maybe. I don't know. Pinned conversations and messages is really nice because there's occasions. I mean, obviously, Aaron and I send texts back and forth all day long, even though we're in the same house together. But there's occasions I'll be in the car and she has fallen off the most recent 10 conversations or whatever. And it's much more burdensome to say, hey, Dingus, send a message to my wife. What do you want it to say? Well, tell her blah, blah, blah. And so anyways, having her always up at the top is excellent. Widgets and live activities are, I am in full support of this, although I don't know that that's a need that I have in the car specifically, but I dig it. iPhone widgets work in CarPlay, which is cool. They also plugged CarPlay Ultra. They said the first vehicles with CarPlay Ultra just launched last month. I presume
was there more than one Aston Martin SUV?
I think they just mean that there's more than one copy of the Aston Martin that has been sold. I genuinely think.
They have sold 3 of them.
Right, exactly.
So weird, but yeah. Anyway, and when they showed the interior with the new look with CarPlay, I think it has a better chance of matching more cars' interiors. We talked about that when we talked about CarPlay Ultra, like this sort of Fisher-Price candy-colored iOS 7 CarPlay next to the, the punch-through of the seat adjustment in the Aston Martin. They didn't match styles. This kind of glassy translucency, the companies that design their own car interfaces love this stuff. They love gradients. They love translucency. So maybe this will be a better match for more other manufacturers' UI.
Yeah, and it's funny because they said, and this should be an almost verbatim quote, "This is just the start of the CarPlay Ultra journey with many more brands around the world looking to bring this experience to market. Combining the marquees or the manufacturer's unique look and feel with the power of iPhone," which here again, I think what they're nodding in the direction of, you don't have to make it look 100% like Apple. You can do your own
just
thing.
50%.
Just 50%. And before we move on, I just wanted to point out that they did say, and I didn't get a chance to write down the quote, but they said that when a call comes in, for example, it doesn't take over the entire friggin' screen, because that's the most annoying thing in the world is when you're driving and you have the map view up and you're trying to, navigate, and then somebody calls you and you can't see your map anymore. It's infuriating. And now they have like a little toast style thing that pops up. I am here for that. Then Darren Adler came in to discuss communication and whatnot. They talked about how they did change the look of the phone app. There's now call screening, which I presume is opt-in, but it can automatically answer calls from unknown numbers, and it'll like triage that, and it will ring through to your phone. Like the phone won't actually ring until the caller has identified themselves and tells the phone why they're calling, which I'll believe that if I see it, but in principle, I dig it.
I mean, don't you all kind of do that today? When I'm curious, I'll do the thing where like you let it pick up the voicemail and you see the little text going, right? This is just more like automating that process even further for you.
Mm-hmm. Hold assist, which again, tentatively very excited. We'll see what it's like in reality. But the theory here is that if you're on hold, the iPhone will detect the music that's playing and it will let you do other things and even effectively hang up the phone, not literally hang up the phone, but effectively hang up the phone. And then once and this is now a quote, "Once a live agent becomes available, we'll ring you to return to the call and let the agent know you'll return shortly." This is kind of really obnoxious, and I'm so here for it because, oh my gosh, when you have to wait on hold for an hour, it's infuriating. And you know what? I think this is a pretty great idea.
All right. Well, so now, I mean, this is maybe a wonderful moment in time where we'll have this tool that will help us, but you realize this is an arms race. Because now, so what this is doing is like there'll be a computer voice saying, "Just a moment, Casey Liss will be back here in a moment. We're ringing him now because you've left him on hold for an hour." It'd be great if they said that to the person, but those people don't. But anyway, those people can also deploy a system as like, well, we're not going to bother our operators until we know that we have a live person. So it's their robot talking to your robot about who's going to be back when and who's going to be called when. And you're hoping at some point both of them will agree to ring the actual humans and connect them on the call. Yes, not, but anyway, I endorse this because this is a tool for the world that we live in. The world that we live in, sometimes you got to be in hold for a long time and you can't just be sitting there listening to their terrible, like overdriven clipping music from whatever decade interspersed with a message that says your calls are important to them, blah, blah, blah.
Yep. Messages get some new treats. I'm an old, so I don't care. They get backgrounds. They get group chats, including polls, which actually could be kind of cool.
Yeah, polls will be useful. That's cool.
Request, send, and receive cache. Again, that could be useful. What I'm really digging is typing indicators for group chats, including who is typing. I'm here for that. You can also screen unknown senders when it comes to messages, which is cool. Then we've got Leslie Akamoto, who comes out, who talks about images and how you can mix emoji and make images using ChatGPT within the Image Playgrounds app.
Yeah, this is a theme of so sprinkled throughout the rest of the thing is we have a feature that we introduced last year that's not that great. We've slightly improved it. Hopefully it's better. But by the way, we know we suck, so just let ChatGPT do this. Because honestly, image generation, like if you've tried to use their image playgrounds or Genmoji and tried to get it to do something, you either luck out and it's one of the easy things that it can do, or it's hopeless. You will never get it to do what you want. But ChatGPT image generation is amazing, and hopefully they're exposing the latest and greatest version of that. Don't even bother asking image playgrounds to make your image for you. If you want a Studio Ghibli-ified version of a picture of yourself, just ask ChatGPT. It'll do it in 2 seconds, setting aside all of the intellectual property and artistic concerns, which are beside the point. In terms of just the quality, ChatGPT can do this better. And Apple everywhere in their OS is like, we will not be able to get better enough to do at doing this, to announce this as WWDC 25. So please add a backdoor side hatch, escape hatch, so that they can use ChatGPT. And I hope they do this in a way where you're not getting some babyified ancient version of ChatGPT that's not really good at it, or there are tons of guardrails or whatever. Because we've seen that before where asking ChatGPT correctly produces an amazing result, but asking through Apple's intermediary, it does not. And I think what they said on this and all the other features is like, yeah, when you do this, we're sending your query to ChatGPT, and if you upload an image, we're sending that image to them. And like, they didn't make as strong a privacy thing. They just said, look, you have to opt into this. So you are choosing to do this, but there's kind of no getting around the fact that you will be sending your data to OpenAI. And if you don't want to do that, don't use this feature.
Yep. They made mention of the fact that you can do different image styles like oil painting, realistic image, etc., which they explicitly did not allow in the prior version of the image playgrounds. And additionally, there's an image playground API, which I thought there was at least a modicum of it in the past, but apparently there's either more or new API this year. Live translation, which I really dig. You can translate conversations on the fly. This is integrated into messages, FaceTime, phone, etc. It's 100% on device. The words are translated as you talk, and they're spoken out loud for the call recipient. They did some demos of this, and to their credit, it did not appear to be sped up because the latency looked like crap, if I'm honest with you. But I respect that.
But yeah, to their credit, because like if they were going to speed it up, they would have sped it up from that.
They would have, because it looks slow. Well, here's the thing about this. I love this. I love this being like a system level thing that's everywhere. And being on device, like the latency is not network latency. It is just like, look, this is how long it takes. But the thing about live translation models is the gigantic ones that you can't run on your phone are just better. And this is the type of like natural language, real-time translation is the type of thing that I really wish I would actually love to year after year get just the most monstrous model to do the translation for me that's not running on my phone, because the data you're sending back and forth, it's low volume of data. It's latency sensitive, so that's true, but you're sending text. Like the only thing you care about is like the round trip time, but there's not going to be sort of any upload or download time. It seems to me that Google is way ahead on this in terms of the sophistication of the translation. I've already seen a couple people posting online about how like if people who spoke both of the languages saying this translation isn't that great, but like the fact that it's there at all is the important thing. If you need it in a pinch, if you're in a foreign country, if you're talking to somebody who you don't understand their language, you want them to understand you, you'll take anything that kind of gets the point across. And so I love that this is there, but like doing it all on device really feels like one of the things I would look for from Apple is like, I want the best translation in the world. And if I have a good network connection, do that. Fall back to your local model if you have to, but just give me the best. Like I would even consider paying for that, because the gap between like not particularly sophisticated auto translation and the world's best is pretty big at this point.
Nevertheless, I respect that they're doing it. I respect that they didn't speed it up, etc. Then we get Kathy Lynn to talk about Apple Music. There's lyrics translation, lyrics pronunciation, which is cool if you're listening to something in a foreign language. There's auto mix, which also sounded pretty cool, where it'll seamlessly go from one song to the next, similar to what a DJ would do, including using time stretching and beat matching. I think that's neat. Music pins for things you want to listen to frequently. I like that. Maps gets to learn your preferred routes, and it'll let you also search visited places. That sounds really useful to me. Like, oh, where did I get a bagel a few weeks ago? And I don't remember the name of that place was, but I know I went there. If this works, then I think that would be really great.
Oh, both of these things, by the way, music pins and visited places. It amazes me how long it has taken to Apple to get around to these things, but I'm so glad they have. Like most third-party apps are much better about this. Recognizing, kind of like you recognize that not every button on the face of a controller is used with equal frequency, recognizing when you're in an app, like you're probably going to use one of your top 2 or 3 playlists way more often than the others. You're probably in messages going to message the same handful of people way more than all the other words. The UI should reflect that. Same with visited places. Yes, there's a search field. You can search for stuff, but what you're probably interested in is someplace you might have been before. So privilege that in the UI. Allow someone to pin the things that they use frequently. Give a special place of privilege to places that people have been before, because they're highly likely to go there again, more likely than, say, every other place on the earth that they haven't been. And that's just basic, obvious information hierarchy and customization. And yet it's taken 26 versions of iOS, not really, to get to that point. So kudos for them for finally adding it, but it's like, oh geez, I'd forgotten even, I'd almost given up even wanting to, and there is a way to pin playlists now, but like more prominently have a giant button up there that's like, yes, this is the playlist I use all the time, top left, love it, add it to every app, please.
Then we've got Wallet, where they talked about car keys, driver's licenses, etc. Apparently boarding passes are getting better, which I'm excited about. This was the first Sherlocking that I saw. They said they're going to be shareable live flight statuses. I joked in our internal show notes, RIP Flighty. Flighty is an amazing app that does a lot more than just this, but it is a shot across the bow nevertheless.
And what it is, it's raising the bar for Flighty is for people who really care about and either fly a lot or really care about the details because it is just best in class. But what this does is someone who is never going to pay for Flighty, it gives them a baseline level of functionality that people aren't getting now, like live activities for your flight, shareable flight status. Like every flight tracking app has that in it, but now this is something that just comes with the OS. And I think that's appropriate. Like what comes with the OS should be baseline level of pretty good. And if you are a quote unquote pro user of flying or whatever, then you step up to a third party app. And so I don't think it's a Sherlocking at all. And I honestly, for people who fly very rarely, it's almost impossible to convince them to pay for something like Flighty because it is kind of like a premium expert level product. They just want the basics. And now it's built into their phone. I think I give this a big thumbs up.
Yep. And then they talked about Apple Pay, where you can use point redemption not only or installments. And I guess you could already do that online, which I've never personally done. But now you can do it
when you pay, yeah.
But now you can do it in person. Additionally, they're getting order tracking beyond just Apple Pay orders. And I got to tell you, I have only seen this myself once or twice so far, but with stuff that I've ordered with Apple Pay where, you get the order tracking information in the wallet app. I almost never see this personally, but apparently this is going to go beyond just Apple Pay orders and they're going to sniff through your email and try to find, that sort of information, which I think is cool. So again, jokingly, I said RIP parcel in our internal show notes. And here again, I don't think it's quite that simple, but, it's still a quasi-Sherlocking to a small degree. And
the complication here with any of these things is okay, we'll go through your email to figure this out. Where do you think my email is, Apple? It's not an Apple mail. Oh, well, never mind then. Right, yeah. All of these things, like Google's been implementing this feature for years, but they want your mail to be in Gmail. Otherwise, they can't see your mail as easily or at all. And so, yeah, this is these sort of context-aware things. I wish they weren't so siloed, but just the nature of the beast these days.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of features like this that Apple adds every year that are kind of boil the ocean problems of if we can get a whole bunch of, different people and companies and sometimes governments and some of these features on board with our system, this will be great. And they have, a mixed track record of actually doing that. Sometimes the things they do that way do work out. Usually there has to be a decent incentive for the other party, or parties to do it. And a lot of the things are we have a brand new, like you were saying earlier, John, about the web stuff. We're going to declare a new CSS property to fix this layout bug on the iPhone.
Every web page will update.
Right. It's if it's we've declared a new standard. It's superior to all the other standards because it's private and it's secure, and it only works on our devices. But it's going to be great as long as we get all these different companies or whatever to participate. Those have a much higher miss rate. So it's great when they hit, or it's great if they hit in a way that the app or service or whatever that you use happens to work with it. Great. But a lot of these features we kind of have to view through the lens of that might be great in 10 years when it gets adoption, if ever. But maybe not necessarily anytime soon.
My impression with the auto tracking is they're doing what Google does, which is we will look at your entirely unstructured, probably HTML email, and we will rummage through it and try to find things that we think are information about orders. And then we will extract that information from totally unstructured text data and turn it into a parcel alert type thing. Google's been doing, again, for years. Google does a pretty good job of looking at any old email. And these companies that are sending you messages about your orders aren't in cooperation with Google. In fact, many of them, like Amazon, intentionally started omitting information from their emails so they didn't want Google to know what you were ordering because they use that to sell ads against, and there was this whole battle and blah, blah, blah. I'm assuming that's what Apple is doing, that there is no standard that anyone needs to comply to. Apple will just rummage through your email, which is totally unstructured, and they'll figure it out. And I trust Google much more than Apple to successfully extract order information from unstructured emails, just because they've been doing it for years and years, and this is not Apple's strength. But it does. I think it does rely on you using Apple Mail, because otherwise Apple doesn't have access to your mail. So there's that.
And then we move on to gaming with Ann Tai. Apparently over 500 million people play games on the iPhone, and they've announced a new Games app, which is the new destination to help you get more out of your games. Apparently the app itself works with a controller, if I understood the keynote right, which is kind of cool. And they talked a lot about how you can play games together, including first-player games, but I kind of zoned out during this portion, so I didn't catch the specifics. I don't know if either of you did. But in principle, it sounds good. So
yeah, this is a boil the oceans thing like Marco was talking about. As long as game developers use our new APIs, and it's like you can't even get them to make games for your platform that aren't just ports. Like to use the custom phone platform APIs to do things like challenges and leaderboards. If there's any kind of game that has it's not iOS only, they already have their own system for that. They're not going to incorporate your thing. Like it's more so on the Mac that it's like pulling teeth to get them to port the game at all. But on iOS, even though a lot of games are made for iOS, so many games, they're made for at the very least iOS and Android. And some of them are just across every platform. And those games are never going to use any of these Apple APIs. Because if they want this feature, it has to work on PC, on game consoles, on iOS, on Android, and they're never going to port to the Mac.
I mean, some of this, so, okay, the Games app, like, so one thing that struck me about it is that it actually is useful, even, like, I just launched it on my beta phone, which is full of games that don't support it because it just came out, and these games haven't updated yet, of course, because they can't yet. And it actually does have value in the sense that, like, it is basically like a games launcher and games promotion area. The question for me, so, okay, it's designed a lot like the TV app, where, okay, here's the latest games. You can continue playing the games you played most recently.
Is that buried 3 screens down to continue playing the game you played? But here's some new games you might want to play instead.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're going to do that, but no, right now it is above the fold, but it's near the bottom of the fold. And there's, a huge promo slot above. Again, it's just like the TV app, the same kind of design. So it's like, oh, I'm ready to sit down and play a game. Let me go into the Games app. Who's going to do that? That's my question. Is like, not that they didn't make a totally decent looking app here that looks just like all of their other like content browsing apps, but are phone users going to open up the Games app to get to their games?
They're going to launch the app that launches the app.
Right. I don't understand who's going to open this. Like, okay, it's nice that they basically have, it's basically Game Center, right? They basically took Game Center, made it nicer, made it modern. You have like leaderboards with your friends. I did like the idea of the like score challenges with friends, even in single player games. I think that's a cool little thing.
I think all that stuff existed previously in Game Center as well. It's probably the same APIs, right?
I don't know. It certainly, some of that, at least some of it did. But the new app, again, it's nice, it's polished. It looks exactly like the TV app, but not that different from the App Store.
At least it doesn't look like green felt.
Right. But like, I don't understand who is going to like keep this on their front page of their phone and launch this before launching Candy Crush or whatever. Like, I think people who play iPhone games dedicate space on their home screen to put the game icons directly there instead of adding a different tab to open up another kind of heavy, slow app. By the way, like if you navigate the bottom of the Games app right now, it's so rough. It has the new tab bar. It's really sluggish. The animations are, again, unhinged, like so over the top, like ridiculous navigating on this tab bar. It's super, like it lights up when you tap it. Like you can, anybody out there,
have RGBs?
Yeah, if you have this beta installed on a device, open up the Games app and just navigate between those tabs. It shows you right there, like, oh, this tab bar design could use some editing. But anyway, yeah, it's a fine app. I just don't think people are going to actually use it.
Kind of disappointed that the long shot rumor that they were going to bifurcate the App Store into games versus non-games, and this would be the Games App Store, like it basically ended up being like Steam, where this is the place where you go to find the games, buy the games, download the games, install, but they didn't do that bifurcation, so instead it's just like Game Center, but not as embarrassing looking.
Yeah, like if they actually did that, if they actually like took games out of the App Store and put them only in games.app, I could maybe see that. But like even that, like, I have I have this, what is this NFC app that's showing up in my, like, I think it's not.
Someone miscategorized their own app.
Yeah, like it kind of depends on, on like the categorization in the App Store too. Like what, it raises the question, like, what is a game? And there are a lot of apps that are kind of like in between, or kind of like vague as to, is this a game or is this an app? So it raises a bunch of weird little challenges like that. But again, I think it's a totally fine set of Game Center evolved functionality. I don't think people are going to actually use it.
We got some discussions about visual intelligence from Billy Sorrentino. This, I didn't really get this, to be honest with you, but the idea is the same thing with visual intelligence, if I'm not mistaken, is where you could mash down on the camera control on the newer phones and take a picture of something in front of you in the real world and basically ask, what is this? And now you can do that using the screenshot button gesture thing. So you can take a screenshot and you can, basically ask your phone, where can I buy this great jacket? Or you can scribble over like the little part of the image that you're interested in and say, search for similar images online. And I guess that's useful, but that's not something I can imagine ever doing. However, they did point out that if you take a picture of like a poster that has event information, it will suggest that you add that event to your calendar, which that I am very here for. And there's also ChatGPT integration. And this is where the first time I recall them saying, App Intense, baby, App Intense, App Intense. You should look into App Intense. Did I tell you the good word about App Intense? Do you know what I am doing right now? I am intending to tell you about App Intense. It's all about App Intense, as we all expected.
Yeah, this is like kind of another one of these half measure features. They're not what we want is the thing that they showed last year, which is, why should I have to take a screenshot and feed it to the thing and go into this modal thing? Shouldn't I be able to just say, hey, Dingus, like, find this thing for me, or where can I buy this lamp? And it will find the lamp in the image. It knows what's on my screen. Like the whole thing of manually making you take a screenshot and going into a mode and scribbling over the thing you want, and then potentially firing out the ChatGPT because Apple's own stuff can't do what you want. It's a very manual process. It's like on the slope from, like we always talk about with chatbots, like you could do your own web searches, open a bunch of pages and tabs, read all those pages, synthesize the information in your head and come up with the results. Or you can have an LLM do all of that for you and just go to ChatGPT and say, give me the X, Y, and Z, and it tries to do it and hopefully does something similar to what you did by saving you time or whatever, right? This is like, we can't yet do that on the phone. Yeah, Android does a much better job of this, is closer to this than we are. We would like to be able to say, activate our voice assistant and say whatever it wants. It knows what's on your screen. It knows what app you're in. It knows all the app intents that are exposed on your screen. It knows all this stuff. You can just talk to it and it will do it. They don't have that. So they said, well, you used to be able to do it with the camera and say, here's an image, do this. Now you can do what's on the screen, but first you have to take a screenshot, and then you might need to annotate that screenshot, and then you might decide what thing do you want to do. Do you want to ask a question about it, or do you want to do an image search, and do you want to do it with the Apple thing, or do you want to do ChatGPT? That's a lot of taps. But I'm glad they give the ChatGPT backdoor. I hope, again, that backdoor is at least as useful as launching the ChatGPT app, feeding it the screenshot you just took and asking it the same question there, but we shall see.
Yeah, this honestly, I'm more optimistic about the two of you on this feature. I think this... the simple version of what they showed, I think, is very powerful right there. Like, the simple thing of like, oh, here's a text about an event, screenshot it and, make this a counter thing. It's basically a really advanced, what used to be called data detectors. But, so we have that sounds great. And then also the kind of, pluggable system made by the App Intense of like, well, you can like have, if somebody screenshots, a photo of, I don't know, a podcast.
You say, find this on eBay for me. Like specifically, Don't just search the web for it, but like, I want to buy this on eBay specifically, and eBay exposes an app intent that will launch you into the native app with the search and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I can see this becoming something over time that we use all the time, and that actually ends up being incredibly, just incredibly valuable in little ways throughout the rest of our lives using iOS devices.
Yeah, but it's just halfway there. Like, why do I have to initiate the screenshot? It's already on the screen. You're the phone. Like, just do it.
We are sponsored this episode by BetterHelp. A lot of people today, we face immense pressure. We're all pressured to, perform, to provide, and to keep it all together. And so it's no wonder so many people in the U.S. suffer from depression every year, and it's often undiagnosed. It's okay to struggle. Real strength comes from opening up about what you're carrying and doing something about it so you can be at your best for yourself and everyone else in your life. Talk to someone, a friend, a loved one, or a therapist. I personally have benefited from therapy. I can strongly recommend. It's a great thing out there. And there's, we need to remove the stigma from therapy. Like I mentioned in an earlier ad read for them, it's like, it's kind of a ridiculous thing if you have something wrong with your teeth and you go to a dentist. No one's like, you go to a dentist? Like, no, you go to get checked up and maintained and fixed when there's problems. There's nothing different about mental health in the same way. So with over 35,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. They have an app store rating of 4.9 out of 5 based on over 1.7 million client reviews, so it works. And it's convenient. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button. No matter what your schedule is or your needs for where you are, you can fit therapy into your busy life. If it's not working out for you, you can switch therapists at any time. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/atechpod. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/atechpod. Thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring our show.
All right, and then we moved on to watchOS, which wasn't that much there, although what was there I thought was really good. This was presented by Stephanie Postlethwaite. They said they're going to have a workout buddy, which I thought was Anya from Fitness Plus, but I think it's actually Sam. But anyways, this is a dynamic generative voice that's using voice data from one of the Fitness Plus trainers, like I said, that will give you just the right encouragement. I dig this as an idea. I'm not sure the execution is there, but I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt.
They did say you get to pick from voice assistants or from the voice things. What they didn't say is you can pick from the one that's really perky that you want to kill and the one that's more chill. And but again, some people want the most enthusiastic thing possible and some people don't. And so I bet kind of like Carrot Weather where you can turn up and down the snark.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, they give you choices of things. I think it's a good feature. I think it's a good feature as long as it's optional and as long as you get to pick. Because some people will really benefit from having someone encourage them in their ear about, you just did your fastest mile, you're blah, 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 keep going. And some people will want something much more tame, but they do actually want to know, good job. That's the, that was your third workout this week. That would be like the Carrot Weather turn dial all the way down. It said a fact. You ran 3 times this week. That was your third run. That may be the level people want. They want to hear somebody tell them that was your third run this week. They don't want to hear, that's so great. That's your third run. And but let the person pick. So I give this feature a tentative thumbs up, not knowing what any of the voices sound like except for the one that they did in the picture, but
sure.
In the video. But I think the one in the video will definitely work for some people.
Yep, I agree. There's better smart stack stuff. They said something about volume, which I totally missed. There's a wrist flick gesture. So if you're looking at the face of the watch and flick your wrist away, that does something. It was unclear to me what specifically it does.
The
volume thing is they're going to dynamically adjust the volume of dings and audible alerts on the watch based on your surrounding.
So not embarrass you quite as much when you're in a quiet room and it goes ding.
Right.
For the people who have sound on their phone, on their watch, which boggles my mind, but different strokes.
Yeah, and the wrist flick gesture was to dismiss notifications, silence alarms, and dismiss the smart stack. Which is not that different. So the double tap gesture is more of a yes, confirm, open thing. And so the wrist flick is more
like cancel or
escape. Yeah, exactly.
And then they're apparently doing a pretty good job across all the platforms. I mean this genuinely. I'm not trying to snark. They're doing a good job of keeping parity with at least some of the features, like messages, for example. So you're getting live translations, conversation backgrounds, new actions are being offered, like share my location on Find My. Also, Notes is coming to the Apple Watch, which sounds silly, but I actually am here for. I dig that.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, I have probably way too many notes, so I don't know how the search affordance is going to be, or maybe it's just going to be the few most recent notes. But either way, I'm excited about that. Then we got tvOS, which basically amounts to, hey, let me tell you about all the good Apple TV Plus stuff that's coming. Oh, and we did some things. Moving on.
See, again, if you're going to have an ad for your TV shows, put it in the Apple TV Plus. That's all I'm saying. I allow them to say we have a bunch of new shows coming out. Here they are. At least it didn't last that long.
Well, and again, tvOS, there actually are there's one massive great new feature, the automatic sign-in API. But
how many years have we heard that Apple is going to fix the sign-in problem on Apple TV. This could be the year. Every year could be the year. But man, we've been burned before because this is the main problem with tvOS, especially if you are suckers like we are and buy a new one every single year not every single year. Every time they come out with a new one, we buy them, which means we have probably more experience than most people with setting up new Apple TVs, and re-signing into all your streaming apps is just like pulling teeth. It's not like watching paint dry because it's painful, like pulling teeth. And every 5 or so years, they say, we've solved it. You're not going to have to do that again. And we're centralizing the sign in, and we'll just get everyone to work, and it'll sign you in, and everything will be synced. And we're like, this will be great. And then we try it, and it turns out 2 apps adopted, and they're not the 2 apps that you use, and you have to spend an hour signing in. So try number 3, 4, automatic sign in API. This time for sure. I hope they do it because I hate signing in, and I wish they would fix this, and it has gotten better over time, mostly through them allowing you to use your phone and your own iCloud keychain to do it from your phone. But still, that's so painful. Please let this be the year that it really, really solves the problem, because this is a big problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah, but again, it depends on all the apps buying in and updating to use it, and how if you look around at the group of streaming service apps on the Apple TV,
and how much they love Apple.
Yeah, how many of them seem like they care a lot about like fine details of user interface design and user experience,
or like doing anything to help Apple, which competes with them with its own streaming service.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Like this is part of Apple's problem of basically declaring war on the entire world at various times, is that like these companies don't want to help Apple out, and so like something like this, it would be great if they all adopt this, but I think odds are low.
I agree. However, I disagree with you saying this was the one good feature. This is good if you're someone who uses profiles. We are not yet that family. Maybe we will be.
You will be.
But the thing that really got me excited, even though this is not a need that I actually have myself, is permanently connect to any speakers. So my understanding is if you had I almost said AirPods. If you had HomePods, you could say to the Apple TV some way, somehow, the particulars don't really matter, I always want the Apple TV to play through this 1 or 2 HomePods. And that was the only way you could do it. If you had an AirPlay speaker, you could selectively, every time you start the Apple TV, go in and say, please use this AirPlay speaker for the purposes of playback. But then as soon as the Apple TV suspends, it would disconnect or forget that. And now, if we're to believe the keynote, you can say some way, somehow, always, 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 when I'm playing something on the Apple TV, AirPlay the audio to such and such speaker. And that's really exciting for the 3 people that need it. Now, I'm not even one of them, but I'm excited for all 3 of you. All right. If you'll permit me, which you won't, but I'm going to try, let's skip macOS, do visionOS, and then let's come back to macOS and iPadOS, because those are the big ones. So since you haven't interrupted me yet, visionOS was done by Mike Rockwell. We got some new experiences. Happy birthday to Underscore. There's a widgets app in Widgets Kit, so I'm sure Underscore is going to be very happy about that. Additionally, you can remember where your apps, or it will remember where your apps are, including widgets, even across restarts. And I think if I understood the implication here, I think what they're saying is if you have a room in the house where you're typically using the Vision Pro or typically doing work or what have you, the way it works today is you can arrange where everything is and put a Slack window over to your left and Safari in front of you and Pages to the right or what have you. But the moment you take the Vision Pro off, that's largely forgotten. Or at best, if you put it back on, they will appear relative to your head in roughly the same spots, but that may or may not be what you want. And if I understand them right, I think what this is saying is Safari will always be, or what did I say? Pages will always be to the right of you, about 5 feet away from that specific wall. In other words, they are going to stay stationary. I cannot talk. They're going to stay stationary in 3D space, and that will be persistent across restarts, I think is what they're saying.
Yeah, at least the widgets are. I don't know if the apps are doing that too.
I thought they said that, but maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, I think they said the apps as well. Although it's got to be like somewhat like constrained, because if you're sitting at your desk, yeah, everything will be in the same place. But if you're in the same room, but say at a different desk across the room, will that remember a second set of things? Or
yeah, I'm not sure.
Because if you sat down at that desk, you turned it on, all your windows are behind you at the other side of the room. That's not useful.
Yeah. But I mean, in principle, I like this in theory anyway. Then we got Haley Allen to come up and talk about spatial stuff, including you can have spatial scenes, spatial browsing in your web browser. And apparently personas are dramatically better. I believe the term they used was that the enhancements were striking.
Yeah, they did look a lot better.
And it did look a lot better to me. I haven't put the beta on my Vision Pro yet, but I will at some point. I'll take a look. Also, you can do shared movies or games for people in the same space, which is super cool for the one
for
person.
All the families that has $3,500 headsets for every member of the family.
Exactly. But that being said, I still think it's very neat. They talked about some enterprise stuff, which for the three of us doesn't really matter. But the short of it is that you can get a common pool of Vision Pro devices, and you can kind of share them amongst team members. I guess what Light Shield, whatever it's called, and all that stuff notwithstanding, and the inserts. Like, I'm not sure how they're going to manage that, but still, I dig it.
Yeah, I think what they said too, like it was very clear that you wonder who is using the Vision Pro, because it doesn't seem like it's that many people. And what we heard Mike Rockwell say, quote, hundreds of companies worldwide use Vision Pro for something. Now that could be that they've sold 200 of them. That could be that they've sold, that they sold them to 201 companies worldwide. But there are and we saw the same thing with Microsoft and HoloLens over the years. There are interesting theoretical uses for specialized industries and stuff like that. We just don't know how many of them are actually doing it. And in the case of HoloLens, the answer was not many, and then they shut it down because not enough people are doing it. But a lot of these features are very clearly made for okay, a team has one or two Visions Pro to test something on, and they have 10 engineers who occasionally might have to use one or something. So let's make it easier to share them between people, and that's great because this is still a very, very niche, kind of specialized, extraordinarily expensive device. So the launched version of the Vision Pro was atrocious at being shared between multiple people. Now, they do still have the hardware problem, as Casey said, about the light shield size, the straps, the lenses inside if you have prescription lens inserts. They do still have all those problems of sharing those needs between people. But at least they have made what appear to be substantial improvements in the realities and convenience of having multiple people share one, or at least trade off or temporarily share one Vision Pro. So they're finding some kind of market maybe for it. It still seems like it's very optimistic, but they are adding stuff. This is more than I expected to see in this release. I kind of expected there to be almost nothing, like a tvOS level feature improvement to visionOS. And no, it's something. They're still working on it. There is stuff in here the VR controller support, and the 3D model viewing from Safari. There's stuff like that I don't know why they couldn't have gotten that for the launch, but I'm glad it's here now.
I thought the 3D thing in Safari was there at launch. What am I thinking of, Casey?
I'm not sure. I think the difference is that you can do the 3D stuff within the web page, whereas previously you had to download a USDZ or whatever the heck it is. I might have those details wrong.
Yeah, because that kind of thing, that's huge. One of the great things that is possible in the Vision Pro is basically online shopping for things how big is this lamp I want to put on my table over there that I'm seeing on some shopping website? Will it actually be too big? And you can take measurements, you can try, but before, since basically nothing supports the Vision Pro out there in the content world, you would see the web page, and a lot of web pages now will have view in 3D AR on your phone, but those things never work on the Vision Pro. So you have to even if you own a Vision Pro, you have to take it off, take your phone out, and look in little 6-inch AR view on your phone. And so hopefully this kind of thing will broaden the compatibility of that kind of thing, and maybe those AR views that are in every web page now, maybe those will just work on Vision Pro now. Which, if true, that'd be great.
That was their strategy with the GoPro and Insta360 thing. It's there is existing content out there that, in theory, should be useful on the Vision Pro, like all those web pages you just talked about that you have to use the phone AR. Can we just change visionOS so that stuff works? I hope that's what they did with the 3D page stuff and not some new API, because no one's going to do new API for just Vision Pro users. It's not enough of them. But surely for the GoPro and Insta360 and Canon video, these are existing video files made by existing cameras that are just out there that previously, because they weren't the super special Apple format, the Vision Pro just ignored them. But now it's we'll take whatever data files you have. You took these videos, they exist in the world. We should be able to show them to you, quote unquote, correctly, in the 3D way that they're supposed to be shown in Vision Pro, and now they can. That's what they need to be doing with the Vision Pro. Not telling everybody, you should shoot all your video in the special format that looks best in Vision Pro, but just saying, what have you got? What have you got out there that we think would look good in a headset? We will learn how to read it, and so it becomes useful.
Yeah, and then going back a half step to enterprise stuff, one of the things they said is that you can save all your settings to an iPhone. And if I understand this right, what this means is, and I think this is applicable outside the enterprise, let's say that John comes to my house and puts on my Vision Pro and sets himself up as a guest user or what have you. I think by some magic, you can, or John can save that information either to my phone or presumably to his phone. And then the next time he puts on my Vision Pro, it can beam that information, slurp that information up from his phone or wherever, such that he doesn't have to do the whole eye calibration and all that. Because if you're not familiar, if Erin uses my Vision Pro, which she does only under protest because she finds it very painful to use, like physically painful to use. But nevertheless, if she puts it on, she does the thing where you look at the different dots and you pinch your fingers to kind of figure out where your eyes are. And so it can get all that calibrated. If she pulls the Vision Pro off at all and puts it right back on, guess what? She has to do that whole dance over again. And it's a pain in the butt. And so hopefully this will work a lot better such that, I can have her save her profile to somebody's phone and then it'll just load right up the next time.
Imagine that the Vision Pro had the smarts in it of a $10 smart scale that when you step on figures out who you are based on your weight. Imagine if we had that. How about just a giant menu of huge blurry images that you can't see correctly yet because it hasn't converged to just say, Casey, Aaron, and you just look to the left for Casey and look to the right for Aaron. Anyway, someday maybe we'll even get a settings syncing across macOS. Can you imagine? We don't have the technology for that today, but someday.
Well, they don't even. They have the Iris ID or iID, whatever.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
just use that. They know who you are.
They did. I think in visionOS 2 they added like some kind of guest awareness, and we talked about it on the show. But this seems like a step up. And like to Casey's point, like it being portable on your phone is kind of great for an environment where it's like, okay, well, maybe there's like a limit on the actual device, but if you have a bunch of employees in a company and they all have their phones, they just bring their settings with them, so they could go to like some other random headset that they've never worn before, but because the settings are on their phone that they carry with them, it will sync, again, the enterprise type sort of visionOS hoteling. If you know what hoteling means, I'm sorry.
Yep. I sure do. All right. I think we should probably now backtrack to Tahoe because I certainly have plenty to say about iPad. But if you'd rather reverse that, gentlemen, I'm happy to do that in reverse order.
No, please, let's do macOS because I think there will be many future shows about macOS, but I'll try to go semi-quickly here. This is the one thing I wanted to get installed, and it was slightly painful. But I did get Tahoe installed, and I have tried it because I needed a lot of questions answers that were not answered in the thing. So they said Tahoe, they're like, oh, it's beautiful, the glassy water, blah, it's like glassy, yes, wait, whatever. There's Tahoe for you. And they kind of glossed over a lot of stuff. They're like, and of course, it's got the new design. And before they started talking about some features, most of which are cool. But what do they mean that it has the new design? So number one item, I just got done talking about how they didn't change the icons to be round in iOS or anything else. They're not all round. It looks like the same Squircle type shape. Since I believe Big Sur on macOS, they've said, you should make all your Mac icons be Squircles. But the Squircle was actually like, the standard Apple Squircle was like inset within the the square area that you're allowed to make an icon. So you have like, you make icons of many different sizes in macOS. But let's just say like 128 by 128. That's your square. And the Big Sur design was make a Squircle inside the 128 by 128, but leave space all around it. So your Squircle is not 128 by 128. Your Squircle is substantially smaller than that because there's a significant white border around the entire thing, but that was the standard. Everyone gets Squircle icons. All those Squircle icons are smaller than the full area of the thing. And so when I saw that they hadn't changed the icon shape, I'm like, oh, well, that's good for macOS because they've already been on this Squircle standard. But of course, not every app adopted Squircle-shaped icons. If you just had an old school icon and yours is 128 by 128, you could fill that whole 128 by 128 with content, or you could make a little thing in the middle, or you can make your icon shaped like a frog, or whatever you wanted to do. It was entirely up to you. You can make it any shape you want. They recommended Squircle. In Tahoe, they insist on Squircle. Every Mac icon in Tahoe is in a round rect jail. Doesn't matter what the icon is. Pick any icon you want. For example, Script Editor, the editor app for AppleScript. I don't know if you can visualize that icon because no one probably uses it anymore because AppleScript is somewhat defunct, but not really. But it is a Squircle. It's a white Squircle with a little AppleScript scroll icon on it. But like many past Apple icons, it has a tool leaning over the Squircle. And the tool is a pen. And the pen is floating over the Squircle on an angle, and it breaks the bounds of the Squircle. The end of the pen goes up past the edge of the Squircle. What Tahoe does with that icon, it says, your icon's not a Squircle. You go to Squircle Jail. So it takes the script editor icon and it shrinks it and it draws a round rect around the existing round rect and it makes the background gray. So it's like the script editor icon on a round rect. Just they insist that not only is your icon a Squircle, but it is only a Squircle. You must not break the bounds of the Squircle. You go to round rect jail. That's what it will do to your icons. I have icons for 2 of my 3 Mac apps that are not Squircles. They're going to round rect jail, which is not great. Not great at all. So,
and to be clear, is this is even if the app is not recompiled with the new SDK?
Oh yeah, no, this is the Finder doing this, remember?
So all apps that don't get updated are going to have these gray jails around them?
Well, no, so here's the thing. There's like, okay, but like I said, if your app is following the Big Sur guidelines and it is a quote unquote a Squircle, it's just a bitmap. It's just like for the 128 by 128 size of your icon, it's a 128 by 128 bitmap. It just so happens that there's a transparent background and your Squircle is embedded in it or whatever. But I put my non-recompiled straight off the App Store Squircle Hyperspace app and I launched it. And in the dock, it showed just like it does today. It did not put a jail around it. So somehow it knows that my icon is a legit non-boundary broken Squircle. And that's all I can tell right now is that it didn't put it in the jail. So I'm not sure what it's using to determine that, but I know that my Mac App Store version of my app knows nothing about Tahoe. But on Tahoe, it was not in jail. So this is going to be a problem area. And your icons that are put in this jail, they look terrible. Apple's icons look terrible. Your icons will look terrible. It's not, you don't want it. I don't actually know the answer to this question. We'll find out in future episodes. But like, if I want to get out of this jail, what can I do? Do I have to make my icon a Squircle, or can I preemptively Squircle myself? Can I put myself in my own background and say, because then you at least get to pick your margins and like how you're centered in the Squircle. And then will you just allow me to display myself that way? Setting aside the third thing, which is, I still don't know the answer to this. On macOS, can I use Icon Composer to make an icon out of a series of layers that it will put the translucent glass treatment on, blah, blah, blah? Can I do that or can I not do that? And if I do that, can I say on all previous OSs, use my existing icon, but when you're on the new OS, use this new one? The icons, perhaps surprisingly, the icon situation is the most fraught on macOS. It's really annoying and absurd and one of many things in Tahoe that turns out to be way uglier than you think it's going to be, at least in this first beta.
All right, so we got icons covered. Then the menu bar is now completely transparent, and I expected to absolutely grab and clutch my pearls when I saw this. I actually don't think it's bad. I think it's fine.
So we've been here before and past OSs where they tried to make it super duper transparent, but something happens when you make it not there. Like there is no background. It is like there's no border, there's no nothing. It's just like the word, file, edit. Those are just sitting there. There's no line underneath them. There's no background behind them. It is gone. And what that is essentially is the naked robotic menu bar. Because they're saying, what's the minimum we can ship? Because if you don't like this, you could just do a desktop background that has a white stripe on the top of it. Now, it's annoying if you change resolution a lot because that white stripe won't be the right thickness all the time. But if you don't change resolution a lot, you could put a desktop background on that gives you a menu bar that is 100% white, which is a thing that was much more difficult to do back when they were like, oh, well, the menu bar will incorporate colors from your whole desktop background and pull them up into it and smear them across. Like you could try to influence that by putting a white thing behind it, but it would pull colors from elsewhere on your background and still kind of make it weird. But with this, with 100% clear, make the menu bar however you want. And by the way, if you really can't stand this, if you turn on reduced transparency in macOS Tahoe, at least in the first beta, it will just give you a white menu bar again. So I'm not a super big fan of this. I think it's kind of dumb because, well, it's not as dumb as the floating toolbar. That is the winner of the worst decision that they've made in this redesign. But it does mean that the menu bar text now has to display legibly over whatever your background is. Because remember, it's not doing anything to what's behind the text. So it's real easy, and I would have done this if I was doing a review, to come up with a background that makes your menu bar 100% illegible. It's real easy. Just put something in there with a bunch of words, for example, like or put zebra stripes or put dots, or like it's, and I don't know if like I haven't actually tried it, so maybe they detect that and try to do something about it. But like, to what end? What is the benefit that I get from this? Why do I need to see my desktop background behind the word file for the file menu? And by the way, when you mouse over it, a lozenge appears and like smears it, and so you actually like when you're mousing over it, it becomes more legible. I guess it lets you see more of your desktop picture if you really want to see that top sliver. Of course, they could also accomplish that by having a normal menu bar and having the desktop picture start at the bottom of the menu bar. But then, of course, they have auto hiding menu bar so they need to move the image up. Like, this just seems like a change because they felt like doing it. You've got the notch up there too, taking some of the real estate, but I don't know. It doesn't bother me that much. Like, honestly, completely gone is, in my opinion, better than all of the almost completely gone things that they've done before. I'd prefer it if it was just white or black, because I don't think it is valuable to see my desktop image behind the words in the menu bar. But because it is 100% clear, I have the option to not do that if I really care that much.
All right. There's allegedly more menu bar and control center layout customizations. They did a lot with changing the color of folders in Finder, and additionally, you can add symbols.
That's a throwback, by the way. Yeah, so the colors is a throwback. When they introduced labels in macOS, or I believe it was System 6 for the Mac 2, I believe that the original implementation of labels, well, I'm not entirely sure, as I'm old and don't remember. I think they might have just changed the color behind the text. But anyway, at some point in classic macOS, when you applied a label to a folder, it would color tint the folder icon itself. And at some point in the macOS 10 history, they said, oh, we'll put that little circle next to it, in the Finder, like in list view, or like, it doesn't like tint the whole icon. And coloring the icon is better. It makes the folder stand out more. It's easy to pick out. It looks nicer. So I heavily endorse this change because I think labels are a great feature. And I think they're being minimized in recent years has really hurt them. I also like adding the symbols to folders because this is a thing that there's apps that do this for you that will make a folder for you with an icon on it. But like, because Apple changes the folder icon, like in every OS in subtle ways, you'd end up with this hodgepodge of icons. If they were made by like past versions of some app, they all don't match each other. Now I hope what it's doing, it's all just like programmatic and structured, saying, here's the symbol, here's the label, and then whatever OS you're using, we'll pick the color, we'll composite them together. I think this is one of the better changes in macOS. I look forward to having colored folders with cool icons on them.
Cool.
And by the way, on the menu bar and control center customization, it's very much like when you try to customize control center on iOS or iPadOS, where you get that like the little widgets and the dragging out the things, only they've extended that. They've significantly changed this portion of system settings. So if you think system settings hasn't changed at all, it has. This one lets you like find things, like what the search feature is enhanced to find the widget you want and then drag it from there to the menu bar, or at least hit a plus button in the menu bar and select from a thing of widgets. It's very janky and broken in the first beta, but you can see that they're doing something very different here. And I think it will probably be better than the existing system of just scrolling through that giant list and trying to find places where things are. But it's hard to say in its current janky state, but it seemed to me that the search worked better, and this is all new UI for dealing with the stuff in the menu bar. I couldn't figure out how it worked at first glance, which is not a great endorsement of its like usability and obviousness, but I'll give them some benefit of the doubt that they'll get this straightened out before it's released.
There's now more continuity with other devices. You get live activities on macOS in the menu bar, which I am here for. If they can make that work and it doesn't look dumb, I dig it. Additionally, there's now phone app in macOS, so you can place calls and whatnot. They also spent a surprising amount of time talking shortcuts, including that you can run shortcuts automatically based on time of day, saving a file to a folder, connecting a display. This reminds me of, what was it, Control Plane or something like that from many years ago, which may even still be a thing for all I know, which was, I think, the tagline, and we've talked about this on the show before, is context-aware computing, which basically, based on what Wi-Fi you're connected to and what displays you have connected, it would let you run different things. This was many years ago now, but it was a great app. There are intelligent actions where you can have it do things using their language model. Additionally, Spotlight has gotten a serious overhaul. You can do all sorts of different things. You can browse your content, including most relevant files, and that also includes intelligent suggestions, recent apps, system actions, including Play Podcast. You can send an email with parameters, and they did a demo of how this works in-app with our friend, Gus Mueller's Acorn, which was super cool to see. So congratulations to Gus. Then they also have a clipboard history, which I never thought I'd see the day, but that's pretty cool too.
So that I think they undersold that because it's like, oh, and by the way, we have clipboard history built in. The way it's implemented is weird. Like it's in Spotlight, which may not be where you expect it. If you figure out all the shortcuts, it's like Command Space, Command 4, down arrow, return. Like it's not that different than most of the clipboard managers you have. I do like that it's built in, but it's pretty hidden. Like I do wonder if people are going to discover. I kind of wish that a clipboard manager was built in. I don't know. I guess you have to make it part of Spotlight because where else would it be? But yeah, so this is the biggest upgrade Spotlight has gotten in years. It hasn't suddenly become Raycast or even Quicksilver, but it has gotten way more features than it used to have. Like in that world of things like, Alfred, Quicksilver, Raycast, what's the other one? There's a bunch of Launch Bar. Yeah. Some of those things just have a tremendous number of features, are incredibly extensive. Again, those are third-party apps. Those are for more like the pro users. Spotlight is what most people use. It's an okay app launcher. Now it's also an okay clipboard manager, an okay action thingy. Like it's like, this is even just using it for 2 seconds. I'm like, oh, this is better. Like they've made it better because like there's obvious prior art that they should copy from, and they did. And they made simplified versions of that stuff without as many features and tweaks or whatever, but I'm so glad to see it. It's so good that I'm actually debating whether I'm going to stop using Quicksilver and start using that instead for most of my things. I think I'll still stick to PaySpot because I'm a little bit more sophisticated user of clipboard history. But having just gone through the years-long effort to get almost everyone else in my family to use clipboard managers almost all the time because they're so useful, it'll be so great that I'll be like, look, you don't even worry about if you have PaySpot on your new Mac. It's just built in. Yeah, and keep in mind that's also having all this functionality built into the Spotlight UI in the Mac. Some of it appears to be available on iPadOS as well. I don't know if we know any details about how much of it yet. But that's like step one to getting it on the iPad as well. And then you have clipboard history on the iPad, which was never possible in a good way before. It should be on the phone too, is it? Do you know?
Maybe.
You have it on you have the phone OS. Well, if you pull down Spotlight, is there anything that looks like clipboard history in there?
No.
I'm looking at an iPad. I don't see squat, but I probably am not understanding how to activate it. So
Take
this might be
4. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, this might be a Casey issue, and maybe it's there, and I just don't realize it.
No, the UI on the iPhone looks exactly like it did before. Just now everything's slower and glossy.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the thing. Clipboard, we've talked about this before. Clipboard history should be across all their platforms. It should be a baseline feature across all their platforms, and I'm glad they added it to some places, but it's kind of weird in the year where they're unifying everything that it's not everywhere.
But hey, that's step one. Step one is get it on any of their platforms, and then slowly maybe they'll add it to the other ones.
All right, and then we continue on. There's a games app. There's some stuff about Metal 4, which I could not possibly care less about. So, John, unless you care.
Although on the Metal 4 thing, 2 things on that. One, I've briefly seen people go by saying that this is a change on the level of DirectX 10 or OpenGL 3, and that it actually is a breaking change from the previous versions of Metal, presumably for good reasons. Not a big deal unless you're a game developer or someone working on a game engine, but there's that. And the frame interpolation, we talked about that when we were talking about DLSS. I think in the context of the Switch or whatever, for years and years, gaming cards have all had their own alphabet soup technology that would first upscale your image intelligently to make it look better, and then eventually upscale it and also add frames that didn't exist, like synthesized frames, and we talked about that on past shows. Metal is a little bit behind here in that they already had some kind of smart upscaling, and I think this is their first frame interpolation thing where it will generate frames for you. Surely it is not state of the art. Surely it is not best in class, but it is a thing that Apple needs to have. So every time I look at anything having to do with Metal, I'm like, Apple's pretty good at this. It's a shame they don't know how to do anything else with games, but like Metal is actually good. If somehow they could convince the entire industry to make games based on Metal, it's got pretty good performance. And the only thing holding it back is that it doesn't have the world's best game developers pushing it like all the other, DirectX and Sony's APIs and everything and all those, the video card drivers for Windows. Like there's that whole ecosystem that is driving the rest of the industry forward, and Apple's here all by itself, plugging away, and all by themselves, they're doing a pretty good job making a really good API that almost nobody uses and almost nobody cares about, that's always a little bit behind everybody else.
All right. And then this is when visionOS actually happened, which we already spoke about. And then we get to iPadOS. And the rumor was that this was the year. We did it, Joe. And I think that's the second time I've made this joke in as many weeks. But nevertheless, we finally got functional iPad multitasking, or so they claim. I was very skeptical. I was giving my side eye. I was so skeptical. Or my side eye was giving side eye. I was so skeptical. But I got to tell you, I think we might have done it. I think this might be it. And I immediately put iPadOS 26 on my iPad because I'm a fool and I don't listen to my own advice, but also because the iPad, like I said earlier, is not a critical device for me. This is great. Like, there are a lot of problems with this beta in a general sense, like especially animations and like the whole liquid glass stuff is not great, or whatever they're calling the design system. A lot of that is not squared away yet, but multitasking is excellent. I am loving the little bit of time I've spent with it. I don't know why it took 10 years or whatever it's been, 15 years to finally just say to us, you know what, maybe we should mimic the Mac. And I'm stealing some of your thunder here, John.
Well,
but,
you know, what they really did was the Bono thing that we just talked about. This is like stories of surrender. Finally, they just said, give up and make windows that you can resize and move around. Guess what, Casey? You are the janitor.
Yeah.
That's Steve
that
Jobs derisively said, oh, you got to manage your own windows, making you the janitor. Sometimes you just want to move and resize the stuff on your screen in a series of windows. And they tried for so long to come up with something better. And I think they did come up with a whole bunch of better things with limited functionality. But the moment you want to do something that doesn't fit within one of those paradigms, you're into this weird world of like playing this game of figuring out, okay, within these constraints and within the things that it's possible to do, now I have to bargain. Okay, I can have two apps side by side. I can have one and slide over, and I can have this image here. Like, it's like just at a certain point, it's like give up and use Windows. Stories of surrender. Like let us have Windows with window widgets. And it's so funny to me how they, you know, we talked about this last time of like that they did not want to have any kind of sort of always visible window control because that's against the iPad paradigm. And people were like, well, but they've got those three dots in the top center of the thing. I'm like, oh, but that's like the 3-dot menu. You know, and that is sort of like overlaying your content, but it's so tiny and it's not the same as having like always visible things and the ability to arbitrarily resize and move. And you know what Apple did with this thing? They're like, okay, we're going to take the 3 dots. We're going to move them to the upper left corner, which already is a big change because having them dead center in the top is like, it's saying, oh, this is just a little thing at the top of your window. Just ignore it. It's overlaying your content. It's not a big deal. Moving it to the top left, it's like, okay, now there's a dedicated spot for this. And make the 3 dots a little bit bigger. And put them in a capsule, which is a trend, by the way, that I do like with this new design system, that basically everything in the title bar area has a capsule outlined around it.
Everything everywhere has a capsule.
Yeah. It's not a high contrast capsule, but they're not just like iOS 7, just like line art floating in space and good luck to you figuring out what's a button and what's not. But anyway, they put the 3 dots in the upper left-hand corner. And now when you go over the 3 dots, you know what they turn into? Friggin' macOS stoplight widgets. It's like, yes, there you go. You did it. You did it. There's essentially a title bar. I mean, at the same time, macOS has slowly been losing its title bars. Now, iPadOS has half a title bar. You can drag windows around. You can close, minimize, and expand them with the stoplight widgets. You can resize them from the edges. You can put them wherever the hell you want. The very first demo the person did who was demoing this, is she took a window, she dragged it halfway off the screen. She's like, you know what? There's a thing you can do with Windows. You dragged a window so it's halfway, but you can't see half the window. It's like sometimes that's what you want to do. Maybe for 2 seconds. Maybe you just care about things on the left edge. I do it all the time on macOS. It's a thing you can do when you have control over the windows. You can literally put them anywhere you want, make them any size you want. Hallelujah. Now, I don't know how good this is going to be because people are saying like, oh, you just made a worse Mac. Like, why not just use a Mac at that point? Like, but they didn't. Like, because from my understanding, all the other modes are still there. They demoed one of them. They're like, look, you just want everything to be a full screen. Everything's full screen. You don't have to deal with any of this stuff. And you can still do splits. And I think Stage Manager is also still there. So if you like that, you can do that. But also, there's this mode, which is take a bunch of windows, put them wherever the hell you want. Now, maybe there's still limits. Casey, can you tell me? If you like 10 windows, does it start yelling at you? What's the limit?
I haven't gotten that. I mean, I can futz around while we're talking here.
How does it behave with 100 windows open?
Yeah, all it said, the phrase used in the presentation was, even more windows. Doesn't say how many. I'm sure it varies by model and by how much RAM it has too. Because keep in mind one of the things that has kept iPadOS until recently from having more advanced multitasking is as we've discussed long ago, iOS has no swap file for the virtual memory system, and so.
But iPadOS does now,
right? Well, it does, but I think it's only for certain apps like Photoshop to try to use. I don't think they actually try to use it for apps in general.
I don't remember where that was lying, but anyway, the technology is there. I would be surprised if they just don't start using it for the whole. Because look at this. I believe the iPad Pro now has more RAM, has more than 8 gigs, right? Doesn't it?
Well, but they have certain models where it's if you get the 1 terabyte, iPad, then you have more RAM.
Then you get 16 or whatever.
Yeah, but whatever it is, so there is enough resources now to run a bunch of iPads. I mean, the funny thing is that you were saying how the hallelujah, you can move a window partly off screen. For me, my oh my god moment was when they showed live window resizing of an iPad app. And it's it's so funny. We're celebrating these things
things that happened in macOS in 2001,
or 30 these 30-year-old things in computing that that happen on desktops and laptops. We're celebrating them on the iPad finally coming in 2025
because it evolved from a fixed resolution device that became a 1 or 2 different fixed resolution devices that became a single fixed resolution iPad that became 1 or 2 different resolution iPads that became size classes and it's just creeping up slowly on just let people resize windows and on macOS you can't arbitrarily resize windows. Some windows can't get any smaller than a certain size because it will look bad. So the developer said, no, you can't make this window any smaller because then it won't work layout wise. You have control over it and you have control over how the space is used when you resize it, but it's kind of been growing pains of the historical baggage of iPadOS is that it didn't start as a thing where people could take your window and make it any size they want within your constraints. It was the other way, which is there's only there's one iPad and it comes in one resolution and that's what you designed for. And they're kind of paying for that now with all the apps that are probably going to be pretty janky, arbitrarily resized unless the developers update them.
Well, because that's the other thing. Because iPadOS didn't start out having resizable windows, most of the multitasking versions so far, if you had an older app that wasn't updated for whatever the current system was, it just wouldn't be resizable or it wouldn't be split screenable or whatever. So we don't know yet how many there's still left. Is it going to try to wedge those into the system or not? What's going to happen if an app was designed for full screen on an iPad that doesn't have that big of a screen, like an iPad mini, and you try to resize it there because they said this works on the mini. So how is that going to be handled? One of the challenges that iPadOS has always had is that as they implement these different multitasking things, iPad apps just aren't updated that often by a lot of companies. Or not supported at all, or barely supported, or they ship one once and then Google Docs style they take forever to update to the latest stuff 2 years later or whatever. And again, I mean that's partly because of Apple declaring war on everybody ever, but also just the economics of maintaining a really good iPad app are difficult for most companies to justify. So of all this stuff, I hope it works. I hope people support it enough to make this stuff work. That being said, I'm glad that they are going in the direction of just make multitasking work like it does in the Mac, because there seems to be this almost this condescending view of what users can and can't understand about computing. And they've tried over years, the iPad has been a huge success in usability for computing novices. That you have this simple device, you can't fill it up with malware, it's easy, you just go into an app, when you're done you hit the home button or whatever now, and you go back and nice and easy. And then they've always tried to keep that simplicity over there, while then adding special hidden gestures or things to enter multitasking modes. And they've tried to make those multitasking modes really simple over time, but they haven't really succeeded. They've been very difficult to use, actually. They've been both, hard for novices to figure out how they look and work and how to, close windows and stuff. And they've been limiting to power users who always want a more Mac-like windowing experience. Now they're saying, you know what? For the users who want it to be simple and full screen, that's still going to work that way. Great. That was always an option. And then for people who want to have multiple things on screen, we're just going to make it work like Macs and PCs have worked for decades. Because you know what? It turns out no one needs anything in the middle. You don't need, like, the people who are novices, who don't know how to use multitasking windowing systems, they'll use it the regular way, the full screen way. And for everyone else, just give them the version of this that exists everywhere else in the computing world. So I'm glad they finally got rid of that terrible middle that just sucked for all sides of this equation.
I think some people still do like the middle. I think the middle should still exist, but I think the reason the middle got so much flack is because there was nothing above it. And now that there is something above it, I think it's like, well, if people like Stage Manager, if people like Split View, let them use it, because above that is the thing that gives you much more flexibility. So I think the middle is perfectly fine now that there's something above it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing to consider too is like, how different of an experience is it when you're using it with a trackpad versus when you're using it by touch?
Yeah, they have the new cursor that looks like an arrow, not a Mac arrow because it doesn't have a stem, but it's an arrow for more precise control. Like it's basically recognizing, look, you have an M for iPad Pro and you have an M for MacBook Air. And you can't get them with the same amount of RAM unless you get maybe the 1 terabyte one, but like they're basically the same hardware. And the MacBook Air is so much more capable. You could have so many things on the screen, do so many things at once. It's a Mac, right? But hardware-wise, why shouldn't the iPad be able to do a bunch of that stuff? So now a bunch of the limitations have been removed. We can get to the next one, which is background tasks. Oh, you're exporting from Final Cut Pro?
Wait, hold on. So first of all, you asked me how many apps can I get open. Now, I have an 11-inch iPad Pro from 2022, I think. It was before they got super duper thin. And I got like 7 apps open at once, but given that it's an 11-inch screen, it's useless at that many. Like, not because of speed, but because I just don't have the real estate to really support that many apps.
Now people can make like apps that are useful as like a widget size experience. You know what I mean? Like an app that is just like a mini player for music, for example.
Right. I mean, and the other thing that was interesting was during installation or upgrade or whatever, it asked me in so many words, I didn't have the presence of mind to take a screenshot, but it's also in settings. If you go into settings and then multitasking and gestures, it asked me roughly the same thing during setup. And what it says now in settings is at the very top of the screen, you have 3 different options, each of which has a thumbnail, and whichever one you choose then animates. Your choices are full screen apps. Always use full screen app. Let me try that again. Always use apps full screen and swipe home to switch between them. The middle option is windowed apps, which is what I have selected. Resize and arrange multiple windows in a single space to multitask with ease. Learn more, which is a link. And then finally, Stage Manager. Arrange windows across multiple groups for a focused multitasking experience. Learn more. And so you do have all 3 modes for sure. I suspect that Stage Manager is just like a limitation or an alternate version of the windowed apps thing.
Do you still have slide over?
Let me see. No, not now, as far as I can tell.
I'm going to miss that because I use that a lot. That's one of the middle modes that I use, which is full screen video, but with a slide over thing that I pull out from the side. That is extremely useful to me, and I'll be sad if I can't still do that. But you probably can. It's probably just buried in there somewhere.
Maybe. I'm not sure. Again, just very briefly, super duper digging it. And it still doesn't, I mean, there's still plenty of things that I can't do on my iPad that I can do on my Mac, but this makes doing a lot of things much, much easier, because so often I wanted to have either 2 windows, or which I could do, with like a split screen or whatever, but oftentimes 3 windows, which was effectively impossible. You could do like a slide over dance on top of split screen, which was not fun. And granted, it's been an hour that I've actually had to play with this, but so far I am super into it, and I am overjoyed that they finally just threw their hands up and said, you know what? If you want to have window management, then have freaking window management and shut up about it. And I am so excited. So that being said, I think I interrupted you earlier. You were starting to try to talk about long-running stuff. So do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, that was the limitation of people complain about, that you get this pro level app, and when you're exporting your Final Cut project, you have to leave Final Cut in the foreground, or the export will end. So they added background tasks that aren't immediately killed and aren't super limited, and they incorporated it into the live activities. It's still kind of limited because, like, look, every app on the Mac, if you make it do a thing and then leave that app to go to another app and make that app do a thing and then leave that app to go, all those apps just keep doing their stuff. There are various process controls, and determinations from the developer and the OS about what cores they run on and so on and so forth. But the Mac way is not that, oh, when I clicked away from an app, the thing that it's doing like stops or isn't allowed to run. That's not the Mac way. But the iPad way was like, oh, if you want to do anything in the background, because of the history that came from a phone type device and a phone type OS with extremely limited resources. But here we are today with incredibly powerful iPad Pros, and it's ridiculous that they couldn't do an export of Final Cut Pro in the background or something. So now they can, but they expose it through live activities as essentially, it's kind of like the download list in Safari. Here are the things that are running in the background. Because previously there's been 0 of those. And now apps can put them there. Not sure that's a scalable solution. Like there's no place in macOS where you get like a pull down menu of all the things all the apps are doing. It's like, those are the apps. They're all doing stuff. Like any app can do anything. It's a Mac app. And an iPadOS, it's like, if an app wants to do a thing and not be killed when it's not in the foreground, it needs to do this special thing and we'll put you in this special list. It's a step in the right direction, put it that way. Like I still think it's kind of like a baby step. I still think it's weird and awkward to coalesce it's almost like a miniature version of Activity Monitor that they only expect there to be 4 things. But like, have you ever looked at Activity Monitor on your Mac and see how many things are running? And there's that many things running on your iPad too. They just don't show them to you. But from your apps, like they can elevate something important they're doing. If they're doing an export and Final Cut Pro, this app is now rendering this thing, and that will appear in live activity. So I think it's a good start. I worry a little bit that the interface is not scalable if that list gets very large. But it's one more limitation knocked down. And by the way, like we fault iPadOS for taking so long to do the obvious dumb thing. I give them some grace to have tried to find a better way. They just did not succeed. And so it took a long time. They took a long time to recognize we don't have any better ideas than windows and, moving them around in window widgets or whatever. I mean, they can have a better idea about how to implement those windows, and we'll see if they did that, but they took a long time to finally surrender, and they have, and we'll see how it works. I haven't actually tried it. I think there may be some awkwardness to the way they've implemented the things, but their heart is in the right place. I think this will satisfy a lot of people who are frustrated by the limitations of iPadOS. Not all of them, because there's still tons of stuff that a Mac can do better, and it is a little bit weird that you can buy an iPad for more than a Mac and it is less capable, but one WWDC at a time.
Indeed. But nevertheless, I am super excited about all this. The Files app got updated. I never use the Files app, probably because it's a pile of crap. But it's
maybe
apparently
it's less of a pile of crap now.
It's more Finder-like. Colored folders. You got like a list view with disclosure triangles and it's as I snarkily tweeted that. Turns out the Mac has some good ideas when it comes to multitasking. And then they showed the Files app, and I was like, turns out the Mac has some good ideas about file management too. List view with folders with disclosure triangles and labels. Imagine. It's still a little bit Fisher-Pricey with the big icons and the preview things or whatever, but the Files app getting some love is endorsed. And open with, and so, like just basic functionality we take for granted on the Mac finally coming in dribs and drabs to the iPad, I think is just a thumbs up. This is the cleanest win of all of the sections of the keynote, in my opinion, is the iPad section.
Yeah, I mean, all the iPad stuff was a complete win. And then additionally, apparently this was the get podcasters like us to stop whining portion of the show, because they also said, hey, occasionally people want to record, content creators want to do stuff on the iPad. So you know what we should do? We should allow for you to have local capture of microphones and video, and then be able to share that using our fancy new Files app. So hypothetically, I could, and maybe I'll do this one day just to mess with Marco, I could take my setup and connect it to my iPad, and we could record ATP, or I could record ATP on my iPad. Imagine that. It would be incredible, except maybe for Marco, especially if it failed.
But please, for the love of God, don't do this.
We will see. But anyways, it is a theoretical possibility, and I am really, really excited about that, because again, as we've all said so many times, these are such incredibly powerful devices that have been neutered by software for so long. And now there are still problems here and there, but in so many ways, this seems like it is so much better now. And I am really, really excited for it. Again, in my very brief experience, it's been excellent so far. Granted, it's first beta, so everything is slightly broken, but that's the way first betas always are. I am so incredibly excited for all of this. iPad, 2 extraordinarily enthusiastic thumbs up.
Oh, rewinding slightly, I forgot to mention this in the macOS section, although I think it applies to more than just macOS. Another thing that is baffling to me about this, the new redesign across all their OSs, is their decision on how to handle sidebars. I think it's on iPadOS as well. For the past, I don't know, probably the past decade, if you've looked at any of the Apple platforms, they have been in their drive to add more, to leave more room for your content. They've been shoving everything out to the side. So like the title bar on the Mac used to be a place that was controlled by the OS, and apps didn't draw anything there. And so they're like, well, but what if that's not true? What if the 3 window widgets draw, but there actually is no title bar, and actually the app can draw stuff up there all the way to the edge of the window? And same thing with sidebars. So like, well, why don't we just let the sidebar, like everything runs full bleed to the edge, and there's a thin dividing line between the sidebar and the content. And if the window has rounded corners, guess what? Your sidebar also has rounded corners because your sidebar runs full bleed edge to edge. In this new design, they've decided what the sidebar is a rounded rectangle that is inset with a margin around it, with a border around it. And that rounded rectangle sidebar is floating on top of and within the larger window. And the window widgets themselves are like part of the floating sidebar thing. Like what I'm saying is there's a border there. Like they left space between the inner rounded rectangle and the outer rounded rectangle. I'm like, what's that space good for? It looks visually awkward. Nothing can draw there. Like your content doesn't appear there. Not that it would be useful even if it did, but it doesn't. And it adds this little extra ring around all sidebars of slightly different texture, slightly different color background, because again, the contrast between them is very low, but it's there, it's visible. I'm not sure I dig this look on any of the OSs, but especially not on macOS, because I feel like you're taking away pixels from content for no reason. Kind of like the floating toolbar, but like literally there's nothing there. Maybe if you had like a full bleed image in like preview and you had the sidebar work. Anyway, you'll all see it in Xcode, because Xcode's got a sidebar, and guess what? It's a floating round rectangle that floats on top of the window that incorporates the window widgets, and it looks real weird. So you should fire up Xcode when you get this and see how you feel about it. And then the second thing is the new design on macOS in particular, rounded corners and everything, heavily rounded corners that in various places is not harmonious with the placement of the window widgets, because they got to work on that. But here's the thing. Not all Macs have rounded corner screens. In fact, most Macs, most desktop Macs do not have rounded corner screens.
Who uses those?
Many. On an M4 MacBook Air, I think not all the corners are round. I have it next to me, but it's not open right now. Like some screens have square corners. The Pro Display XDR has square corners. But the rounding of the corners in Tahoe is so rounded that it makes me wonder, like, if there's a Pro Display XDR successor, is it going to have like 1-inch radius rounded corners like in the hardware? Classic macOS and the original Mac, they would just black out the pixels that are there in the corner, and maybe they'll do that in future OSs. But it is weird on macOS to see such heavily rounded corners, and it is unharmonious with the sharp squared edges that are on some edges of Mac screens, especially a third-party screen, of course, but some first-party screens are still like that as well. So I'm not entire. I mean, I know why they did it. It's trying to, everything is rounded, everything has to be harmonious, but it makes me fear that they're going to take away those corner pixels, because it's a lot of them. It's not like Mac Windows already rounded, right? And the Mac menu bar used to be rounded with blacking out the pixels and stuff, but this is a much bigger radius than it was. And I have some concern about that.
Then we briefly got a little bit of talk about developers, Foundation Models Framework. Like we had said, you can get from it plain text or structured Swift data, which we saw a little bit about in State of the Union, which we're not going to get to today. App Intents with visual intelligence. We've got Swift and Swift UI that's allegedly getting better. The aforementioned Icon Composer app, Xcode. They've talked about how it's got built-in support for ChatGPT and other models of our choosing, which sounds really great. The developer betas did come out earlier today. And then we had the ending song, which, again, I really wanted to hate, but I actually thought was kind of amusing.
So this is actually, the ending song, I think, is a good example of how they can walk the line. They're not actually doing anything to improve the relationship with developers in this WWDC, to be clear, right? They're not actually changing any policies. They're certainly not having a dialogue, reaching out. They're not doing any of those things. So let's be clear about that. But is there something they can do to be nice to developers that is not, I'm not going to say not substantive, but like is not one of like, they're not actually solving the problem. And the choice to do this song at the end was a good example, because here's what it is. Like the lyrics in the song were singing positive reviews as written on the App Store. They just pulled positive reviews from the App Store about apps and put them to music and put them in a song. I presume these are real App Store reviews. The apps themselves are real, so I recognized a whole bunch of them. Okay, here's why this was a good choice, at the very least. It was positive things about apps. They were third-party apps. So Apple essentially has someone singing the praises of third-party apps, and it does not center Apple in any way. It wasn't singing about how great Apple is for having an app store, how great Apple is for giving you this opportunity. It was 100% customer, third-party developer, love fest. These customers love these apps, and Apple is nowhere to be seen. That sentiment is an example of them doing something that is potentially beneficial to the relationship between Apple's developers. Not something important or big, like, actually speaking with their mouth words and reaching out and saying we understand you and changing policies. None of that. But if they had made this the opening instead of the F1 ad, I think it would have put me in a better mood for the whole rest of the thing. So I give the ending song a big thumbs up, not because it was just an amazing song or amazingly fun or whatever, but because it showed happy customers and happy developers and did not center Apple.
Yep. I mean, I enjoyed it, even though I didn't want to, but I did.
Yeah, I'm with you, Casey. I'm like, oh no, this is going to be stupid. But you know what? It was fine. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and imagine if one of your apps was one of those apps that got shown. It's like it's
my reviews
nice
are not that kind.
Well, I think they pick ones that didn't have a lot of words because they had to fit into lyrics. But anyway, it was nice. And it's slightly rewinding a bit for the Xcode stuff. I know we're not talking about State of the Union now, but like, it's worth mentioning that basically the Swift Assist feature that didn't ship last year now has come back with a vengeance and is even better if the demos are to be believed. So didn't want to leave you hanging on that, but that's a thing. And they saved it towards the end. And I know that's mostly State of the Union stuff. We'll talk about it next week, but I give a thumbs up to them not giving up on Swift Assist, but instead sort of essentially regrouping and coming up with something even better that I presume will ship for real. I installed Xcode and have launched it. And maybe I just didn't activate that part or don't know how it works. Or actually, I think I tried it and it had some kind of error. So I guess the jury's still out over whether it works because we're only hours in here and I haven't actually tried it. But if their demos are to be believed, Swift Assist lives, and it seems like even better than what they announced last year.
Yeah, I'm really excited to play with it, but it appears, as far as I can tell, to only be on Tahoe, which I don't plan to install anywhere for any reason anytime soon. So I probably won't be able to play with it for a while, unfortunately. But in principle, it looked great.
Yeah, the phrase they used was, quote, "We've expanded our vision for Swift Assist," which is okay, great. I mean, it's so far that, yeah, they did.
It does more stuff than it used to. And, just like the other ones, a little help from my friends. The Apple gets by with a little help from its friends. Because, if their models can't do code stuff, hey, ChatGPT, can you help out here? Anthropic, can we want to use, you have good coding models. I think that's a smart move. I think stop. Yeah. That's an example of, either desperation or humility to say, we do not have the best coding model. When we're going to add this feature to Xcode, let's just have a pop-up menu and say, use Claude, use Sonnet, use ChatGPT, or use Apple's, and then let people pick which one they want.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe this is, I kind of expected the timeline to be longer on this, but I wonder, we heard, 6 months ago or whatever that Craig Federighi was making everybody open to the idea of using other people's third-party models when they can make the best product with those. This seems like doing exactly that. And I think, given Apple's position in AI right now, which is pretty weak still, and not super competitive with any of the, frontier models for almost anything, that's the right move. For things like that, obviously for on-device local processing, Apple's great at that. They probably will remain class leading for the foreseeable future at that, because that is that does everything Apple's really good at. They're really good at power efficiency. They're really good at single computing device excellence. How can we make the best computer, the best phone, the best tablet? They're really good at that. They're not so good at these giant big data problems where you need cutting edge AI researchers doing, making the most smart things on these huge servers. That's much less their style, and things like that have been less their style forever. So I can see Apple always being really good at local models. And so in the time that may be forever, but in the current time where they're not good at the really big frontier size models that run on big servers, partnering with other companies and creating a platform for the other companies to run their stuff in a way that helps Apple's apps and Apple's customers' apps, that's the right move. This could be the way they do things forever. Maybe they will never lead in big AI models. That might be okay if they do a good enough job being the platform. We'll see how it goes over time. But for now, this was the right move, and I'm glad they finally are really doing what appears to be a pretty big job of finally embracing that strategy.
I feel like Google and OpenAI are also ahead in small models that run on device because they're just models are better at everything, including their little models. Google especially is always touting how small they can get their model. I mean, that's been Apple's whole thing too, about Apple Intelligence. It's been a struggle for them to get their models down to the point where they can fit on their phones, which is part of why they expanded the RAM. And even with the expanded RAM, it's been a struggle to get the models down to that level. But yeah, Google and OpenAI have been also working on that for their small models, especially Google for the little models they can run on device. So Apple is not even in the lead on small models, but they have great hardware. And if they can expose that great hardware to other people's models, I think in the Swift Assist thing, I think these are all server models. I think they're going out to the server for Claude and ChatGPT. They don't have like the local, I don't know. I haven't looked at it that much, but I don't know if those companies have optimized their models to run on the phone or whatever, or locally on a Mac. We'll see. But the fact that you have that option at all is like, now it just comes down to like, how good is the interface? And jury's still out on that. I tried to use it, and like I said, it failed. And the demos I've seen in State of the Union that we'll talk about, I'm not entirely sure they've nailed the interface, but I don't think anybody has at this point with these kind of like help me code along type of things. What I can say is they put in a lot of work. They've added a lot of UI for this, and it's fairly sophisticated UI. So that essentially the extra year working on Swift Assist seems to have paid dividends, assuming you can get it to work. I did open up Hyperspace on Tahoe in the Xcode beta. It would not build, so that doesn't bode well, but I'll figure it out.
Overall impressions, though. I mean, for me, the iPad stuff was the star of the show for me. I am really, really, really excited about it. As stated earlier, I'm tentatively excited about the new design changes. I don't love it at all right now, but I really do think they're heading in the right direction. Everything else, it was good. I mean, there were no particular surprises, but it was good, and I'm looking forward to this to getting to work on it, even though I'm also kind of dreading it. And I'm very excited to see what WWDC brings. Which, by the way, I think, and I haven't looked into this, but it sounds like they may have dropped all the videos already. Is that right? Do we know?
Couldn't tell. Like I know why people are saying that because I saw it in the developer app too, but I didn't try downloading like one of the later ones.
All right, well, no worries. Either way, overall, I think this was certainly not my favorite WWDC, but it was decent. It was especially good given how in the doldrums all of us felt and kind of still feel. But I thought this was pretty good. Let's start with Marco and then end with John. Overall impressions and or final thoughts.
I mean, yeah, I wasn't expecting any changes to the developer relationship, and we didn't get any. But we got what we hoped we would get, which is a huge upgrade to the on-device AI APIs and a system redesign. The system redesign, I think we were all going into it like a little bit like, I don't know about this. And I think it has proven to be warranted. That the system redesign really goes very far in a certain very opinionated direction. It's going to hopefully have some revision over the course of the summer, and we are indeed going to have to do a ton of work in our apps to adopt it. It's going to be an incredibly busy summer just to keep up with the redesign, not even considering all the new APIs and stuff like that. Just getting our apps to, fit in, not look broken, and not look old with the new system design is going to take the entire summer, and that's all we're going to be able to do for most of us, if we care about design at least. So that's going to be a lot, and there's going to be a lot of drama over the summer as the design is hopefully tweaked. If it's not, God help us all. But if it is tweaked, or maybe things like tab bars might become usable. right now, they are definitely not. Please don't use the new tab bar in your apps unless it really changes. But anyway, it's going to be a very busy summer. They delivered what appears to be very, very strong technical advancements in ways that will give a lot of us a lot to do, even after we, fix the design. So we're going to be busy, and I think I'm very much looking forward to what I'm going to be able to do with these new APIs. They look, again, very promising. I think I can do some really cool features with them once I finish all my design work.
John.
I think WWDC keynotes, at least, maybe not all the sessions, but keynotes are kind of at the point where the same point that iPhones are, where basically everything leaks. Like, you got all this information ahead of time. It's almost, I think in past years they've said basically like, oh, someone who had access to the deck, here's all the things they're going to talk about. So there's not so many surprises these days, but it's in the details to see what they're going to be like. I was most pleasantly surprised by iPadOS. I like the direction it's going. All the minor details, not minor details, but all the nitty gritty about the technical stuff that's in the sessions, that's always fun. I always enjoy that. Everything just always gets better. We'll talk about that in future episodes, I'm sure. But for the keynote stuff, the redesign, which was sort of the star of the show as far as I was concerned, with the exception of the terrible tab bars, which I think are terrible for additional reasons above and beyond the animation and the appearance, just like conceptually, I think it's a bad idea. I think I'm okay with the redesign on iPhone and iPad. Granted, I haven't installed there, but in all the things that I've seen, I'm like, it could have been worse. Like, again, tab bar aside, everything else I think will be fine. On macOS, first of all, I would say, again, if I were writing a review, this is the most significant redesign of macOS since Aqua. I don't think it's even close. Right? It is so, like, if you look at, for example, from 10.15 to 10.2, you're like, oh, this is a big change, but they did it in little steps. We didn't really have this big discontinuity of like totally new thing. Like they got rid of the pinstripes, they got rid of the translucency, they got rid of the color, they darkened it up, they added a little bit of leather, they removed the leather, they lightened it up, they darkened it up, they smoothed it out, they added a little bit of vibrancy, like small steps over years and years. This is a break. We have a totally new idea. Everything is up for grab. Everything changes. I don't like how it looks. I think it's too bright. I think the contrast is too low. I think it's ugly. I don't like how it works in certain areas. I don't like the way the things like the dock show windows that are going behind them. It looks busier than it used to be. I don't like the new menu bar. The new Finder icon is hideous, and they need to fix it. I don't like the round rack jail that they're putting all the stuff in. It is clear to me now, playing with it for even just an hour, that eventually all the old macOS will look ancient and this will look new, because whenever you have a big break, that's true. But of all the OSs, I mean, I don't know if this surprises me or it just fills my worst expectations. I like the new design the least on macOS. Like, you guys haven't explored it yet, but let me tell you, there's tons of stuff in there. They've changed so many things, and also apps that are on your Mac right now that are not built against the Tahoe SDK, like pre-existing apps. Just everything in them is different. And I understand they do that for compatibility, which is good, but like all my apps have pop-up menus, the buttons, pop-up menus, like every control looks different in old apps and new apps, even in places where they don't seem like they do, because like the button metrics haven't changed, but the button appearance is different. So you're faced with, am I going to fully liquid metal my app and put conditional code in? Because, by the way, the metrics have changed on a bunch of stuff too. Like, I just launched a bunch of my apps, and like the metrics have changed enough that things that used to not scroll do scroll, and things that were pixel aligned are no longer pixel aligned. It's worst case scenario. And like, I would be happier to do that if I really like the end result. Boy, once I get my app updated for liquid metal, whatever, it's going to look awesome. But I don't think it does. It doesn't mean that in 10 years that I won't be perfectly happy with how the Mac looks, but this is going to take some getting used to, and I'm not really excited. What it's making me do is it's making me appreciate how my Mac looks now, because after so many years, things are boring, but like consistent and better in almost every functional way than the new thing they're introducing. Yes, the new thing looks newer, and the old things will look old and it will look dated, but that's just because it's a change. I'm not sure there's any place in the new look that I think is functionally better than the old way. Yet. I haven't dug into all of it yet. And that's disappointing to me because the Mac is my favorite platform, and I really wish I liked what they had done with the Mac more. And I have little faith that they're going to change much of anything. I do hold out some hope that they'll fix the Find Your icon because, hey, it's just an icon and they can fix it and the new one is hideous. But everything else, I'm like, there's no time. They don't care about macOS. They're not going to change this. So in that respect, I'm a little bit down because my favorite platform is bad. But everything else, I think, is a thumbs up.
Well, wait till you use the iPhone version.
In the screenshots, it looked fine to me. But we'll see.
A lot of it is fine. It needs a lot of work, and it's very early and rough.
Oh yeah, and everything's broken. Like when you turn off, like if you turn on reduced transparency on the macOS, I tried to take a screenshot of it, but it's one of those drawing glitches that you can't screenshot. Things blink on your screen at like 30 frames per second, like flashing regions of posterization. It looks like your computer's about to explode. Like it is grim. Like it's just the first beta. Who cares? But I'm just saying, like, there are bugs in this beta that I have never seen before. Like visual, it's almost like your graphics card is overheating. You think somebody think that the OS is going to try it. We saw Tahoe and something, open accessibility, have a bunch of windows open and start toggling those switches and dragging windows around. It is madness. But those are just bugs. But I'm saying, like, even when everything's working perfectly, I don't like it. So it's a contest. Will I be ranting on this show for the next 5 years about the tab bars in iOS, or will I be ranting about everything in macOS? We'll see which will win.
Oh no.
All right. Thank you to our sponsors this week, DeleteMe, BetterHelp, and Clic for Sonos. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join us at atp.fm/join. One of the many perks of membership is ATP Overtime, our weekly bonus topic. This week on Overtime, we're going to be talking about, just the other day, Apple published a paper on the limitations of LLM reasoning technology. We're going to talk about that in Overtime. You can hear that and everything else we've done if you join us. Be a member at atp.fm/join. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll talk to you with probably a mountain of follow-up next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Mastodon, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Briefly, before we get to the after show, or maybe this is the after show, I want to read you the message that Xcode put out when it refused to compile my unmodified application.
Oh gosh.
And I want to ask you if you've ever seen this message before. Because for all I know, it's an existing message and I just don't know what it means, but it's one of those. So please help me. Conditional conformance of type blah to protocol layout does not imply conformance to inherited protocol sendable. That is an error that it won't compile. And this is not in my code. It's in third-party code. So I can't even change it. But I've never seen that message before.
I mean, I feel like we could parse out what they're saying, but I don't think I've ever seen it before.
So the conditional conformance is like, layout where content equals empty view. Or, it's like conditional conformance to protocol. So it's the layout protocol, right? So that all makes sense. But it's saying that does not imply conformance to the inherited protocol sendable. Like, okay, is that a problem? That means you won't compile my code? Like, or again, this is third-party code. So I hope this library updates because I literally can't build my app. And I didn't touch anything. I didn't change to Swift 6.2 like I had. Maybe I have to change it. Maybe it defaults to Swift. Anyway, I haven't had time to look at this, but that is slightly distressing to me because I just assumed it would build out of the box if I just...
Mine did. Call sheet did. We can explore that if you want, but honestly, I don't care because we didn't get a chance to talk about the one thing that I want to talk to you about, John. And this was in the State of the Union, to be fair. And I know we're not really talking the State of the Union, but I cannot resist. This is the last release for Intel. Apparently, Tahoe is all you get. Then your cheese grater will float up to the attic in the sky. And by that, I mean the attic above your head. So we don't need to belabor it too much since we were running very long already. But in short, what's the plan, man?
I'm perfectly happy with that. Like we talked about this on, I think, last episode. I was pleasantly surprised that Tahoe will support my Mac. That's all. Like, I mean, they've already gone longer than I thought they would have. Again, if they had followed the past procedure, they should have ended support in 2024, and they didn't. They didn't end in 2025. They're not going to end it until next year. So I'm perfectly fine with that. And it's nice. I really appreciate. This is not sorry. Every time I say this, I think people think I'm being sarcastic. I appreciate the fact that they announced this year that next year they're going to do this thing, which is not something they usually do. They don't have roadmaps, and honestly, they don't even usually make that decision. Like, they could make that decision, but they've made the decision already that Tahoe will support my Mac. Love it. Great. All the things aside about me not liking Tahoe, but anyway. And the next one won't. So now you can plan. Now you can be like, okay, I can start thinking about what I'm going to replace this. If I care, if I need it lets people plan. It's the thing that people always complain about Apple, that, Microsoft and other PC companies would give you a roadmap. They would say, this year we're doing this, next year we're doing that, here's when we're going to drop support for this. Even with deprecations, Apple's like, oh, this thing is deprecated, and it might go away sometime in the future, and it might last a decade, or next year it might be gone. Right. And they never tell you because they don't know. Like they put off the decision like a teenager and just like procrastinate and say, oh, I don't know. And then the last second they decide. But here they made a decision a year early. And I really appreciate that. It would have been nice if they tell me what the deal is with the Mac Pro sometime before this year ends. But again, hardware WWDC is not really a thing. So here I am patiently waiting for them to do anything with the Mac Pro. Even if they cancel the Mac Pro, that would give me some information. I'd be like, I need a little bit more information before I can make the decision about what my next Mac will be. That's all.
Well, I'm glad you're this chipper about it, and I think you should be. I don't think there's any reason to be.
Yeah,
depressed,
don't you think it was nice of them? And
yes,
I think it's I'm just so excited that if it didn't support Tahoe, I'd be like, well, great. The new OS isn't going to support my Mac, and I have no idea what to buy because they haven't told me about the Mac Pro, what the deal is with that. But I don't have that problem, so I'm happy.